Hello, everybody. How are you guys doing? Happy New Year. Hope you had great holidays. Got a lot to cover today, but first things first, roll call. So please sound off in the comments if you're watching, even if you're watching on replay afterwards and you're not watching live. Just type your location in the comments. I'd like to know where people are joining in from. That's always nice. It's always good. Or anything else you like. It helps with the algorithm, right? Make sure you're all present and accounted for. So that's the first order of business. I don't like to get into things always immediately because they're so miserable and awful, the topics, so we kind of have to ease into them. There's so much happening. There's really so much happening. I see some of you are tuning in from Berlin, New York, Puerto Rico. That's lovely. That's great. The more... I see Los Angeles as well. That's really great. Florida, Canada, New Jersey. Isn't that great? Look how dispersed and spread out and international the audience is. I love that. That's really good. We have someone from Ladie from Syria. That's great. New Mexico. Claudia says the Kremlin basement, obviously. So oh man. Speaking of the Kremlin, we will get to Russia afterwards. There's a whole bunch of hysteria, I think, as they put it, going on right now about Ukraine and Russia. So I'll get to that. Don't worry. I wanted to talk first about Palestine, right? So you guys might have seen the other day, I did a segment on Emma Watson, right? The Harry Potter actress. She was called an anti-Semite. So let me just break this down for you again, in case you missed it, because it's so ridiculous. It's really so absurd how this term is being thrown around by Israelis who don't want anyone to criticize them, right? So she basically posted something on Instagram, a picture. Here, I'll pull it up for you. This is what she posted. It says, solidarity is a verb. That's all it says. Solidarity is a verb. And there's some Palestinian flags in the back. And that's it, right? And she posted a quote with it. But that's all she did. And then the Israeli ambassador, the former Israeli ambassador to the UN, Danny Dunn, he's an interesting character, right? We talked about him before on the show before. He basically came to the UN with a Bible, and he said that Israel has biblical rights to the land. Which, again, I mean, the UN is not a Bible club, right? First of all. But it just shows you the absurdity, how they have to grasp at straws to justify what they're doing to the Palestinians, the Syrians, the Lebanese. But it's the same guy, right? And so he has a Twitter account, and he posts a screenshot of Emma Watson's post, and he says 10 points from Gryffindor for being an anti-Semite, which is sort of a pun. If you've watched the Harry Potter movies, you know when a house, there are like 4 houses, when they do something bad, they get points retracted, and if they do something good, points are added. So this is some kind of lame, cringy joke on his behalf. Like, oh, that's very bad of you, you anti-Semite. I mean, what a cringy joke. Like, like as if Hogwarts has like some student parliamentary group, like, Hogwarts Friends of Israel or something like that, or some Zionist professor waving his wand. 10 points from Gryffindor, you filthy anti-Semites. I mean, this guy is ridiculous. She usually they'll say this, the Israelis, anti-Semite, if you say something about Israel that they don't like, because they don't have, the thing with the Israelis is they don't have any responses to the criticisms, very, very valid criticism. So they do ad hominem attacks. They do personal attacks, right? Oh, you're an anti-Semite. Oh, you're a racist. But they don't actually respond to what the person is saying, even if it's 100% valid, right? And usually the person's not an anti-Semite. Now, of course, you have people who are anti-Israel and anti-Semites, but most people who are anti-Zionist are not anti-Semites. They're just defending Palestinians' rights, Syrian rights, Lebanese rights. And so usually they'll say that after you make a criticism of Israel, but I don't see Israel anywhere in Emma Watson's post. There's nothing there at all. Like, there's just a Palestinian flag. Is he so offended by a Palestinian flag that he considers it anti-Semitic? What is anti-Semitic about a Palestinian flag? Palestinians are Semites as well. Go pick up any dictionary, look up the word Semite. It's a people, right? A Semitic people who speak a Semitic language. So that could be Arabic, that could be Hebrews, Jews. It could be, Arameans, people who speak Aramaic, Assyrians. So people who come from the Middle East, who are indigenous to the Levant, to the Fertile Crescent, Mesopotamia, this region, these are Semites, right? So Palestinians are Semites. So again, I don't know what this means when you say someone who's defending Palestinians is an anti-Semite. No, on the contrary, they're a pro-Semite. What are you talking about? The irony here is that people like Netanyahu, I think one of his parents is Polish, right? The current Israeli Prime Minister, Bennett, they're American. They're not even from the Middle East. It's either their parents or their grandparents have come to Palestine as settlers. So they're not actually indigenous to the region. They come from Europe. They come from the United States. They come from everywhere but Palestine. Does that mean you don't have Jews in Palestine? Of course you have Jews in Palestine. One of the people, I was just reading now, I'll get to the Sheikh Jarrah, but one of the people who's just been evicted by the Israelis is Jewish, right? So he's a Palestinian and he's married to a Jew. So of course you have Palestinian Jews who have been there. Those are Semites, right? That's the whole point. But these guys are from Europe and they're coming and trying to monopolize the ethnicity and weaponize it. So they don't, it's making a mockery of the word anti-Semite. It doesn't have any meaning anymore. It's like when you have liberals who call anyone a racist because they disagree with them, even when they're not being racist. Do you know what I mean? It loses its value. And then when you're trying to fight actual racism and actual anti-Semitism, it makes it harder because you've made the word become meaningless by using it like this, trivially, against this. I mean, if you call this anti-Semitic, I mean, who is going to take it seriously when there's actual anti-Semitism? So do you see how, on the one hand, people like Danny Dunham, the former Israeli ambassador to the U.S., and the Israelis in general, the Zionist lobby, they are disingenuous. They attack people because they don't have any response to their human rights violations, the ethnic cleansing, the genocide, and then they weaken the meaning of the term racist or anti-Semite. And they try to appropriate the term Semite and weaponize it cynically in such a fashion. And it's just disgusting. And people are starting to see through it because this guy got ratioed. I mean, that's the result. People are starting to see through this. And so you had a bunch of, you had a letter organized by Artists for Palestine UK. So they reached out and published this letter, and it's in support of Emma Watson. And you have a bunch of Hollywood stars who signed it. Including Viggo Mortensen. I joke in the other video. I jokingly called him Aragorn. I know his name is Viggo, but he plays Aragorn in Lord of the Rings. Most of you might know him the best from there. There's Susan Sarandon as well, Mark Ruffalo. So a lot of people came out and signed this in support of Emma Watson, and I don't think you would have seen that a couple of years ago. Honestly, I'm not saying that these people had different views back then. I'm saying that it was so difficult to express support with Palestinians. You would be, they try to ruin you just like they're trying to ruin Emma Watson now. But people are starting to wake up and it's becoming more acceptable, thankfully, although it's not enough, but it's becoming more acceptable in public to actually defend Palestinians. And that's why back in May 2021, when Israel was bombing Gaza again, you had tons and tons and tons of protests, everywhere. Even places in the United States, you would have never even thought that. It's insane. It's good. People really worldwide came out. I think in London they had the biggest protests since the Stop the War protests before Iraq. So since 2003, and those were massive. You had 1 million people in the streets back then. So just to give you an idea, right? So Danny Dunham strikes again. So he sees this letter with Emma in support of Emma Watson with Susan Sarandon and Mark Ruffalo. And what does he do? He goes back on Twitter. He just can't stop, this guy. He just can't stop. Let me read to you his tweet. He says, in a letter of support for Emma Watson that was published today and signed by actors Mark Ruffalo and Susan Sarandon, amongst others, it was claimed that Israel is an apartheid state. There is no greater lie than this. Israel is the only democratic state in the Middle East. And then he says underneath, one that grants all its citizens, Jews, Muslims, and Christians, full and equal rights. In Israel, there are Arab judges in the Supreme Court, Arab doctors in hospitals, and Arab ministers and parliamentarians in government. The authors of this letter deliberately ignore all of this. It seems their burning hatred for Israel blinds them. They don't need to take my word for it. I invite them to visit Israel and see for themselves. I mean, this is a joke. This is a joke. First of all, Israel is not a state. Second of all, it's certainly not a democratic state. When you have practices like administrative detention, which I'm going to get to in a bit, which are so archaic, you know, the Israelis, they can arrest someone under something called administrative detention, and it's usually Palestinians, of course. You're not allowed to know why you've been arrested. Your lawyer is not allowed to know why. It's based on a secret file, which you are never allowed to see in your life. You will never know why you were in jail. And they keep you in prison for 6 months. There's no charge. There's no trial. And they can renew it every 6 months. And you have people in jail who spend years in jail. That alone, you call that, I mean, for that practice by itself, I haven't even gotten to like the genocide, the ethnic cleansing, all of the rest of it. But this alone, you call that democratic. You call that a functioning judiciary. When you're using military courts to essentially kidnap Palestinians and lock them in jail and without even telling them. I'm going to get to that in a separate segment in a bit, but that's just one example. And then, of course, you have the ethnic cleansing. Sheikh Jarrah it's a drop in the water. It's a drop in the bucket compared to everything that's happened since 1948. What a joke. And he says that the laws are equal for everyone. No, they're bloody not. No, they're not. You have dozens of laws that discriminate against non-Jews. And you have this nation-state law, right? So this happened under Netanyahu, where they basically proclaimed Israel a Jewish nation-state. I mean, that by definition is you're making it that anyone who's not a Jew is not equal, right? But, I mean, it's so farcical. It's so farcical. I don't know who's falling for this. So he gets ratioed again. And I want to show you the tweet over here from Ambassador Gilad Erdan. So I think he's his successor now. Yeah, because Danny Dunham was, in Netanyahu's administration. Erdan took over under Bennett, if I recall correctly. So he tweeted also about Emma Watson, and he tried to like make it less cringy, but it's still cringy. And he said, fiction may work in Harry Potter, but it does not work in reality. If it did, the magic used in the wizarding world could eliminate the evils of Hamas, which oppresses women and seeks the annihilation of Israel, and the PA, which supports terror. PA is the Palestinian Authority. I would be in favor of that. Like they're trying so desperately to be relevant, and they end up making these cringy, horrific jokes, trying to bring Hamas into the Harry Potter world. Like, what is wrong with you? No, just stop. Just stop. What does Hamas have to do with the Palestinian flag? Hamas came about in the 1980s. They always come up with some new crap, right? So if Emma Watson posted this hypothetically, like in the 1970s, what are you going to say then? They always have some nonsense. She isn't saying anything about Hamas. She didn't say anything about Israel. She just posted solidarity as a verb and some Palestinian flags. That's it. And, the fact that these ambassadors feel so targeted, I mean, it shows the guilt on their conscience. They know it's about them. They know that what they're doing is wrong. They know it. So I just want to do a small follow-up. The lesson from this is that these people like Danny Dunham and, Erdogan, Israelis who trivialize this term anti-Semitic, they end up making it seem worthless. And that does a disservice to anyone who's fighting racism, who's fighting anti-Semitism. And it has nothing to do with the Palestinian cause, okay? Palestinians are Semites themselves. This has never been a religious thing or a anti-Semitic thing. It's an anti-colonial thing, right? Palestinians, man, they're living under the Ottomans. Not just Palestinians, Arabs, right, as well. So from the other, like in Syria and most of the Middle East, they lived under the Ottomans for 400 years, then the British and the French, and then the Israelis, right? So this is an anti-colonial thing that's been going on for hundreds of years, from one oppressor to the next. And I'll go more into that when we get to administrative detention, of how it finds its roots in the British colonial system. So I forgot to say this at the beginning, but make sure you've hit the like button. I hate these goddamn cliche YouTube things, but we actually need it, right? This isn't a gaming or a cooking channel like that. They're actually trying to screw us. So please help fight the algorithm as much as you can. Comment, like, share, whatever. It really makes a difference. I really appreciate it, guys. So, let me just go into the next segment of what happened today, this morning, right? So this is what... hold on, I'm going to switch over to the next one. I'll show you more of democratic Israel, right? As Danny Dunham puts it. So this morning, the Israelis began ethnic cleansing in Sheikh Jarrah. Sheikh Jarrah is a district in East Jerusalem, in Palestine. And they've been trying to kick the Palestinians who live in Sheikh Jarrah out of their homes for a while now, right? So you remember last year in 2021, there were tons of protests because of this. And today, is the first day they actually went in and they started kicking out the families. And I want to show you what they've done here. I posted this in the morning. Israel has begun forcibly removing Palestinians from their homes in Sheikh Jarrah in Jerusalem. The Israeli occupation forces arrested Mahmoud Salahia and his family inside their home, then demolished the house. So just to make sure you got that straight, the Israelis came in to Salahia's house. They arrested his family, kicked them out of the house, and then bulldozed the house. So just imagine someone doing that to you. You have a foreign occupying force, an occupation force coming into your home, arresting your family, kicking out of your home, and kicking you out of your house and bulldozing your house in front of you. And I wish this were an isolated incident. I wish this was the only case. It's not. Right? They've been doing this for decades and decades and decades and building illegal settlements. But when we're talking about Sheikh Jarrah, about this specific neighborhood, they've done it today, right? So here are some more scenes of them bulldozing. So they went in at about 3 a.m., right, in the middle of the night. Here they are. That's what's left of the house. Just turned to rubble. I mean, what can you say, you know? What can you say about this kind of barbarism? I want to ask you a question. If those were Jewish homes, if someone was evicting Jews from their homes and bulldozing their houses, do you think the whole world would hesitate for 1 second to call it anti-Semitism? You wouldn't hear the end of it. But apparently it's okay to do it to Palestinians. And keep in mind, some of them are even Jewish. So it's not even like a strictly religious thing. It's an issue of trying to expropriate the land, take it by force, and kick out all the Palestinians. And I mean, the way they've been doing this is so shady, right? So they've been claiming that under the administrative law, which was passed in 1970, right, that if you're Jewish, you can reclaim any property that was owned before 1948. And so the Israeli government, they've been lobbied by these settler organizations, right, who supposedly are supposed to represent the people who live there. But they've been forging the titles for the land deeds. They've been forging the papers for the land. And then coming and saying, well, look, this was clearly, these houses and this land clearly belong to Jews, and it was taken from them by the Jordanians. It's all a bunch of rubbish. And you need to understand something about the families the Palestinian families who've been kicked out today, right? The Salahiyah family and the other families, because it's about 300 people who are facing eviction, right? It's multiple families. This is the second time that they are facing ethnic cleansing. So in 1948, when the Israelis kicked out millions of Palestinians from their homes, drove them out of their villages, drove them out of Palestine, and displaced them internally, some of these Palestinians ended up here in Sheikh Jarrah, in East Jerusalem. And they were rehomed in these houses, right, under an agreement between Jordan and the United Nations. And now Israel's trying to displace them a second time. It's trying to ethnically cleanse these same families a second time. I mean, I'm speechless. I'm speechless. It's just disgusting. It's just disgusting, honestly. And then they come up with these stories that, well, you know, it's the law. The Israeli Supreme Court decided that these houses belong to Jews, and you guys have to leave, and you're squatters, and you haven't been paying rent. Why would someone pay rent in a house that belongs to them? Like, this is already an incredible argument. They claim that these Palestinians have been squatting there for 65 years or something, or refusing to pay rent. To whom? To whom? It's their homes. Why would they pay rent? Like, the arguments they come up with, the lies, are unprecedented, honestly. And I want you, if there's one thing that you remember, I want you to remember this. Israel has been illegally occupying East Jerusalem since 1967. It has no jurisdiction there. Israeli courts don't mean a thing. Israeli laws don't mean a thing. The United Nations, multiple times, has come out and said clearly, Israel has no jurisdiction in East Jerusalem. None. So when you come and say an Israeli court decided this and that, your Israeli court doesn't mean anything in East Jerusalem. It has no jurisdiction. Israelis have no jurisdiction in East Jerusalem. None. That's not me saying that. Here's UN Security Council Resolution 478, 497, 446, and the Geneva Convention, of course. This is a war crime, what they're doing. It's a war crime. It's very clear. The Israelis are illegally occupying the West Bank, East Jerusalem, the Golan Heights in Syria. And what do? They come in and try to expand their settlements, right? So there's another plan that the Bennett, Naftali Bennett government has now expanded, which is trying to increase the number of settlers, illegal Israeli settlers in Syria and the Golan Heights, which they've also held since 1967. They want to double the amount of illegal settlements there, which, again, illegal under international law. It's a war crime. When you've forcibly displace people and then try to move your own people into an occupied territory, that's ethnic cleansing. That's what it is. And what they're saying here, why they demolished this house today, do you want to hear a real joke? Here's why they destroyed this house today, right? Their argument is that they've destroyed the Salahiyah's family's house because they want to build a special needs school for Arab children. I mean, that's great. That sounds great on the surface, doesn't it? Do you have to destroy their house to build this special needs school? Of course not. Number one, there was enough spot on the land. There was enough land to build the school and keep the home intact. They had several options to go about this, right? They just demolished the house and displaced and dispossessed the family of their house, which they've been living in for generations, for 65 years, right? Number two, again, I don't know what rules they think they're playing with, but just because you want to build a special needs school, allegedly for Arab children, doesn't give you the right to go and destroy someone's house. Again, I can't keep up with these nonsense arguments. I really can't. And then, hold on, I want to show you something over here. A few days ago, you guys need to understand something, because these families haven't just been facing threats of eviction by Israeli courts, these illegal Israeli courts. They've been facing harassment as well every day. You have settlers, Israeli Jewish settlers, who come to the Sheikh Jarrah neighborhood, including Israeli politicians. And basically, they set up camp in front of the houses and harass the Palestinians living there. They throw stones at their houses. They make noise at night so they can't sleep. They curse at them when they're walking in the street. And of course, the settlers are accompanied by the occupation forces, right? So you have these Israeli police or Israeli, the gray and the olive uniform. So either police or border police, and also the IOF, the Israeli occupation forces, accompanying the settlers. So basically, these colonizers come and harass the Palestinians to leave their houses under protection of the Israeli army and the Israeli forces. And that's been going on for a year now, at the very least, right? And the other day, so I'm going to show you a video now from the man whose house was just bulldozed by the Israelis, right? The Salahiyah family. So he threatened to set himself on fire, right? He was basically like, I will burn myself and this house down before the Israelis take it from me. Let me show you this video the other day.
اللي بيطلع من دوره عالم بكون خاين، اطلعوا من الدور مش طالعين من هان، يا منموت يا منعيش، انا حارق حالي، هاي بنزين حارق حالي في الدار مع اولادي مع دوري، اطلعوا من الدور بنطلعش، بلدية القدس جاي بتطلع عيال من دورها عشان تسوي مدارس، لمين المدارس هاي بيسووها؟ بيسووها لهم لليهود بيسووها، اصحوا يا ناس، اصحوا بس شوي صغير اصحوا، اطلعوا من هان مش طالعين، لو على رقبتي مش طالع من الدور. اطلعوا مش طالعين واللي بفوت عندي عهان حارق الدار كلها براميل غاز مفجر الدار باللي فيها وهذا اللي عندي ضل. هات لي كمان قلم بنزين حط هان هات خلت عبوش عبي لي هان بنزين افتح لي فتحتين هان في الدار كمان عبوا الدار بنزين ويحرقوها للدار احرقوها الدار باخدوهاش الا نار بس نار باخدوها.
You can see there in the very last frame how the Israelis are waiting with the machine guns outside the house, right? I mean, what am I supposed to say, man? What am I supposed to say that I haven't already said? How fucking disgusting, honestly. They kick you out of your house in 1948. They kick you and your family out of your house in 1948. They displace you, dispossess you, and then 60 years later, they want to kick you again out of your house in your own country. A bunch of settler colonizers who come from who the fuck knows where. Who the fuck knows where they came from? Certainly not from Palestine, right? And they threaten you with bulldozers, machine guns, and their fake fucking courts that are illegal. 150,000% illegal under international law. No country, except perhaps the United States, since Donald Trump recognizes these Israeli courts. And even when these resolutions were voted on, I think the United States abstained on one of them. But it passed. The whole world is in agreement on this shit. Israeli courts have no jurisdiction in Jerusalem, specifically in East Jerusalem. No jurisdiction in the Golan Heights. No jurisdiction in the West Bank. It's not your land. And this is the funny thing about the Israelis. They always want to claim, oh, well, the United Nations gives us our legitimacy. Israel is recognized by the United Nations. There was a partition plan that was passed by the UN. But then when the UN says you can't build settlements here, you can't kick Palestinians out of their homes, you can't pass laws in East Jerusalem because that's not yours, then, oh, all of a sudden, what's the UN? All of a sudden, they're deaf. They don't want to hear any of that. It's fucking disgusting. And let me say this again to you. If Jews were being kicked out of their homes and their homes were being bulldozed, everyone would be screaming about it as anti-Semitism. But when it happens to Palestinians, oh, it's okay. It's okay. Let's just let it happen. Fuck it. And again, this is not isolated. This is the first one in Sheikh Jarrah, but they've been doing this to Palestinians for decades and decades and decades. How do you think millions of Palestinians were displaced? Millions left the country to Jordan, to Syria, South America, and millions were displaced inside Palestine. What, you think they just all got up and decided to leave their homes and hand them over to colonizers for no reason? Are you so stupid? Are you that naive? Now, this is disgusting. This is disgusting, honestly. And this headline by Mondovice, which is a quote from Human Rights Watch, two-time refugees. Two-time refugees. That's exactly what they're making them, right? They want Palestinians to live as refugees generation after generation after generation. They have no state, no passport. They can't leave. They're stuck under occupation by the Israelis, who kill them, bomb them, murder them, displace them, bulldoze their houses, kill their children. I mean, who on earth could tolerate this? Who on earth could tolerate such behavior? Who on earth could tolerate living under these conditions? And then they want Palestinians to shut the fuck up, right? They want Palestinians to shut up. Not allowed to resist. If they resist, they're terrorists. If they resist, they're anti-Semitic. I mean, who could tolerate this kind of crap? Who could tolerate this kind of behavior? It's disgusting. It's disgusting, honestly. And you know, I'll add just one more thing. The Israelis know that these houses don't belong to them, because they tried to buy off the Palestinians, these families, right? They tried to offer some of them $5 million, but, you know, big amounts of money for them to leave. They're not leaving. They're not going to be displaced again. You can't buy them off. The fact that the Israelis are trying to buy them off is proof that they don't own this land. Why would you buy someone to get off something that you own if you know that you own it? They don't own these houses. The Israeli settlers who are moving into these houses in Sheikh Jarrah are not even the supposedly original Jews who used to live in these houses, according to the Israelis. It's just, you know, I mean, you remember that video with Muna al-Kurd, right? And there's this Israeli-American guy called Jacob who's just stealing her fucking house in broad daylight, right? This guy has nothing to do with whichever Jews supposedly lived there before 1948. It's just some random Israeli American who's come there as a colonizer. That's it. They have no shame. And he even says, if I don't steal it, someone else is going to steal it. Yeah, he's right. He's right. Someone else will steal it. Because that's the goal. They want to turn all of Jerusalem and frankly all of Palestine into a Jew-only land, right? That's their goal. And ironically, as I said, some of the people being kicked out of these homes in Sheikh Jarrah are also Jews. They don't give a shit because they're Palestinians, right? So it's like, whatever, we'll kick you out too. Who cares? And the premise that, oh, well, it's okay because we're going to build a special needs school and we're going to build some public facilities here. This is a cover story. It's a cover story. They don't care about building a special needs school for Arab children. The goal is to take the land, to dispossess the Palestinians. So whether they have a special needs school on it or not, it makes no difference. And another thing, they tried to tell these Palestinian families, I covered this with you a few months ago, right? Back in August, I think it was, when this was in the Israeli Supreme Court. They told the families, they offered them a deal. They offered them a protected tenant status. So that meant if the families in Sheikh Jarrah signed this protected tenant status, that means that the rent could not be raised and they could not be evicted. But the land would be owned by these Jewish settler organizations. So once again, you see how they know they don't own the land. The Israelis know that this land is not theirs, and how they're trying to dispossess the Palestinians. The idea is like, yeah, you know what? We'll let you stay in the house, but you give us the titles. You transfer the deeds to us, so we own this property, and it becomes Jewish. Although again, it's the correct term here is Israeli settler colonizer. It's nothing to do with a religious issue, right? It's a colonial issue. That's what it is. Absolutely disgusting. Absolutely disgusting, really. And people think like, it's 2021. These things don't happen anymore. They're happening right now. They're happening right now, buddy. It happened this morning. It happened this morning. And who stopped it? Who was there to stop it? Where are the Arabs? Where are the Arabs to stop this? Where is Saudi Arabia? Huh? Prostituted by the West. A puppet. Shame on them. Fucking shame on them. Where's the rest of the world? Shame on them. So I know this shit is depressing, but no one, I don't see anyone, if we don't talk about it, few will. I want to talk about something else to do with Palestine, which I mentioned before, which is the administrative detention. I mean, Christ, and they have the balls to talk about democratic and whatever. I mean, it's just... Here we go. Just give me a second to set this up. And again, thank you guys for tuning in. And please comment and hit the like button. It helps with the algorithm. It's very important. All right, just give me a second to pull this up for you. Actually, before I move over to the next topic, I'm going to, just one second, I'm going to stay on Sheikh Jarrah. This is very important. Public service announcement. A public service announcement. Okay? So the Israelis are kicking Palestinians out of their homes in Sheikh Jarrah, which is a district in East Jerusalem. They're bulldozing their homes. This morning, they started with the Salahiyah family. So they're turning these Palestinian families into refugees a second time. So first in 1948, they displaced them, they stole their homes, and now they're doing it again. Right? There's a protest going on in London. If you're in the UK, if you're in London, I want to show you this. Okay? This was posted by the Palestine Solidarity Campaign. There will be a protest this Friday, Friday 21st of January at 6 p.m. in front of the Israeli embassy. Okay, a Save Sheikh Jarrah protest. I see the Stop the War Coalition badge there as well. So, you know, this is a big effort. Make sure you turn up and help out. I'm going to read you the synopsis here, the little notice. They say, they're just giving a description of what I told you happened this morning. At 3 a.m. on Wednesday, 19th January, Israeli security forces raided the Salahiyah family house in Sheikh Jarrah, arresting and injuring multiple family members. After the family, who have lived in the house since 1956, refused to be evicted, Israeli troops barricaded and stormed their home at 3 a.m. Yasmin Salahiyah reports that soldiers beat her 9-year-old sister and aunt, who is now unable to move from her injuries, before destroying the family's home. By dawn, only the rubble remained. Over 1,500 Palestinians currently live under the threat of home demolitions in occupied Jerusalem. In May of last year, Sheikh Jarrah was the flashpoint from which began the most significant period of protest in Palestine for a generation, now known as the Unity Intifada. Israel believes that now, whilst the world's attention is turned away, it can evict the Sheikh Jarrah families one by one. But Palestinians are coming together to resist this threat of ethnic cleansing, just as they did last May. Meanwhile, Israel continues to violently arrest Palestinians in the Naqab in the Naqab desert, right? Protesting a campaign by the Jewish National Fund that threatens the livelihood of Bedouin communities in the area, and that has been razing Palestinian land and uprooting Palestinian trees. These continued violent acts of ethnic cleansing cannot continue. We must support their grassroots resistance by demanding our own governments hold Israel accountable for its actions that amount to the crime of apartheid. It's time to mobilize for Palestine once more. So again, guys, London, Friday, 21st of January, 6 p.m. at the Israeli embassy. Be there. All right. And actually, I just want to show you a video over here. Just one more thing. Look at this. You remember last year in May 2021 when Israel was bombing Gaza, look how big the protests were in London. The biggest since the Iraq War in 2003. Check this out. So guys, you can recreate this. You can do this again. People need to show up. Spread the word. At the very least, spread the word. That's the least you can do. Maybe someone who can go will go, and you never know who's listening. Which sounds like an NSA threat. No, but seriously, you spread the word about the protest. Friday, January 21st at 6 p.m. So. I wanna talk a bit more about Palestine. This is a topic that I said I would mention, and this is a very, very important topic because it is talked about a bit in the media, but not enough. I haven't seen many cover it. And it's really horrific, honestly. It's absolutely horrific. So there are several Palestinian prisoners who gained a lot of attention in the media the last months because they went on hunger strike. Now, the reason they went on hunger strike is because they're being held under something called administrative detention. So administrative detention is when Israelis, the Israeli occupation forces, arrest Palestinians. They are imprisoned. There's no charge. There's no trial. The prisoner is not even allowed to know why they are being held. Their lawyer is not allowed to know why they're being held. They're arrested and imprisoned based off of a secret file, right? And the detention lasts about 6 months at a time, and they can renew it indefinitely. So you could, theoretically be kept by the Israelis forever. There's no trial, nothing. So Abu Hawash is one of the prisoners. Hundreds of days on hunger strike, right? And their health condition deteriorated significantly, of course, right? So he was 100. This was on his 140th day of hunger strike, okay? This just January 3rd, 140th day of hunger strike, right? And some of them actually got favorable results. So the Israelis said, okay, we're going to release you. But here's the catch. The Israelis didn't say, oh man, these guys are really in bad health, we better release them now. They said they won't renew the detention. So that some of the prisoners, for example, they're still in prison and they'll be released in March or February. And Israel says it won't renew the administrative detention, but they're still in prison and they don't know why. They have no clue why they're in prison. And here's the thing. They could be released and then immediately sent back to jail on another secret file or on the same one, and there's no charge, there's no trial, nothing. Nothing at all. Here's Miqdad al-Qawasmi. This was November 1st, so he was on his 103rd day of hunger strike. Look at the transformation. I mean, this poor guy, Horrible. And you got to understand, at any moment, there was a fear that they would die, I mean, have you heard often of people being on their 140th day of hunger strike? That's half a year. That's like half a year on hunger strike. Haven't eaten for half a fucking year. And that's the point that the Israelis drive them to, right? That's the point the Israelis drive them to, that they are so desperate to get out to protest this, that they are at risk of dying. Their organs might fail at any moment. They're slipping in and out of consciousness. They can barely hold their necks up. They can't drink water. I mean, they're in a terrible state. They're in a terrible state, right? And so this is from 13th October. You had 250 prisoners who went on hunger strike, right? So the Palestinian prisoners, they started expanding the efforts. When those 6 went on hunger strike, others started following them and doing the same. Right? Now, I just want to read to you how many days they were on hunger strike, because it's frankly, it's incredible. Just give me a second. I'm going to pull this up for you over here. Kayed Fesfous, okay? He was on hunger strike for 131 days. He stopped his hunger strike on November 22nd, right? And he was released on December 14th. So you see, he still stayed in jail for almost another month. No reason why, doesn't know why. Miqdad al-Qawasmi, he was 113 days on hunger strike. He ended his on November 11th. He's still not out. He'll be released in February. Shadi Abu Aqr, 69 days hunger strike. He ended it on November 1st, right? So he's still in jail and he'll only be out in April 2022. So they only ended their hunger strike when the Israeli prison service agreed not to renew the detention, not to release them. So they're still in prison and they have no idea why. And I want to tell you something absolutely incredible, because the NGOs, there are several Palestinian NGOs who fight on behalf of these prisoners, who raise awareness about these prisoners. Okay? Guess what Israel did to them? they've been attacked. And when I mean attacked, I mean spied on, had their phones hacked. Take a look. This is a report by Frontline Defenders. So it turns out the Israelis had infected the phones of 3 people. Actually, it's 6 of them, but 3 chose to remain anonymous, right? And 3 of them work at some of these Palestinian NGOs who defend the prisoners who are on hunger strike or who are being held in administrative detention, right? So it was from Ad-Damir, Al-Haq, and Bison Center for Research and Development. So Frontline Defenders did a forensic analysis. They scanned their phones and they found Pegasus. So Pegasus is a spyware that can be installed on Android phones or Apple iPhones, and they can turn on the microphone, the camera, they can read all your messages, photos, contacts, everything, the works. And it's made by an Israeli company called NSO Group. And you need to understand something. These people, NSO Group, and there are other companies like them, it's like there's a pipeline with the Israelis from the intelligence units in the army, the military intelligence, and the private sector. So they come out of the military and then they go and found a tech company which builds spyware, and then they sell this spyware to other companies, to other countries around the world, right? The Saudi journalist Jamal Khashoggi, when he was killed by the Saudis in the Saudi consulate in Istanbul, guess what they found on his fiance's phone? Pegasus. So the Saudis most likely bought Pegasus from the Israelis, and they installed it on this journalist's phone. He was working at the Washington Post, and they were able to track his location, the GPS. They knew that he was going to be at the Saudi consulate, and they killed him. They murdered him. He's gone. And a few months ago, again, I covered this here as well, massive investigation, right, called Project Pegasus. This with The Guardian, Wired.com. They found tons of journalists and human rights activists and dissidents who had Pegasus on their phones. Everywhere, man. We're talking India, Mexico, the whole world. So that gives you an idea how widespread the use of this thing is. And so these human rights activists in Palestine, they find Pegasus on their phones. And then Amnesty International and Citizen Lab, who were also working on Project Pegasus, who've been doing a lot of the forensic work, analyzing the phones, they substantiated these findings. Guess what happens right after? So pay attention to the timeline. Right after they find Pegasus on the phones of these NGOs in Palestine, the Israeli defense minister, Benny Gantz, declares the same NGOs terrorist organizations. I'm serious, right? So the Israelis took 6 Palestinian NGOs and declared them terrorist organizations. So again, I'm going to read them to you here. Ad-Damir, Al-Haq, Defense for Children Palestine, the Union of Agricultural Work Committees, Bison Center for Research and Development, and the Union of Palestinian Women Committees. So, this is a way to marginalize them, to cut off their funding, to stop their operations, because these NGOs are exposing Israel's crimes. They're showing what's going on with administrative detention. They're showing the human rights abuses that the Israelis are doing. So the Israelis spied on them and then declared them terrorist organizations. Now, Frontline Defenders, who found the spyware on their phones, think there's a link. And the link is that the Israelis probably designated these NGOs as terrorists to justify using Pegasus. Because Pegasus, the company that makes the spyware, they claim they only sell Pegasus to be used in counterterrorism and solving serious crimes, right? So they only sell it to responsible governments. Yeah, well, apparently it keeps ending up on journalists' phones. Weird. And I didn't hear of any terrorists finding Pegasus on their phones, just journalists and world leaders and stuff. So to try and justify why Pegasus was on the phones, that's probably why they designated them terrorists. So they could say, well, there was no breach of contract, there was no misconduct by the Israeli government, and then they can keep doing business with NSO Group, which makes Pegasus. You see the link? So absolutely disgusting. Here's, by the way, a headline from October 22nd, when Benny Gantz declared the 6 Palestinian rights groups terror organizations. I mean, absolutely ridiculous, right? Absolutely ridiculous. And I want to explain something else to you. This practice of administrative detention, where you can be arrested by the Israelis, thrown in jail, no charge, no trial, you have no clue why you're in jail, they won't tell you, you're not allowed to know why. This practice wasn't actually invented by the Israelis. The Israelis took it from the British. So, as you might recall, the British were occupying Palestine. It was a mandate until 1947-48. And so, in 1945, to stifle, to crush Arab uprisings and Arab revolts, the British, they passed something called the Defense Emergency Regulations. This thing, okay? That's from 1945. And that's where administrative detention comes from the British. So they had the notion that they can go in, they can search any house, they can seize any item, they can arrest any person. There's no charge, there's no trial. There's just some kangaroo military tribunal. The person arrested is not allowed to know why. And there's a military censor as well. Guess what? That also exists in Israel, right? So you may have heard before in the past, the Israelis love to talk about how democratic they are and how they have a free press. In Israel, the Israeli military and intelligence can censor the media if they feel that something that they've published is, a threat to national security, right? They can just they can censor that shit. They have the power to do it, and that comes from the British, the military censor, the media censor. So basically, the Palestinians have gone from living under British colonial rule to living under Israeli colonial rule, with many of the same laws still in place. These laws that have been imposed on them by foreigners, by colonizers, by settlers. Incredible, isn't it? The British were using administrative detention mainly against Arabs, and the Israelis thought, hey, let's keep doing it. Why not? And administrative detention, I'm going to tell you specifically why it's illegal under international law and the Geneva Convention, right? So, number one, the Geneva Convention, it prohibits collective punishment. You can't occupy a country and just collectively punish everyone. The Israelis use administrative detention as collective punishment. How do we know this? Because since 1967, they've issued 50,000 administrative detention orders. 50,000. Administrative detention is supposed to be used in an extreme case. Someone, who has a machine gun or who's posing an imminent threat and imminent danger, you have to take him into custody. It's supposed to be used on an individual case-by-case basis. You can't just take anyone you like and throw them in prison and not even tell them why for no reason. Okay? And so that's already one of the violations. Okay? Article 33 of the Geneva Convention. You see it? No protected person may be punished for an offense he or she has not personally committed. Collective penalties and likewise all measures of intimidation or of terrorism are prohibited. That's Article 33 of the Fourth Geneva Convention, and Israel violates that with every administrative detention order. 50,000 of them they've issued since. Okay? Now we go to Article 71 of the Geneva Convention. Now, Article 71 says that if you're going to try someone in a military court, you can only do it if there's been a regular trial, right? You actually have to give them due process. Well, that doesn't happen at all. So what the Israelis do, you see here, it says, the Geneva Convention says no sentence shall be pronounced by the competent courts of the occupying power except after a regular trial. There is no regular trial. The Israelis arrest you, and then you're in some kangaroo military tribunal where your lawyer doesn't even know what you're being charged with. You're not allowed to know what you're being charged with, and they just imprison you. There's no regular trial. That's another violation. Article 66 of the Geneva Convention. Prisoners must be sent to non-political military courts. Let me pull that up for you. There you go. Okay? So the occupying power, meaning Israel, may hand over the accused to its properly constituted non-political military courts on condition that the said courts sit in the occupied country. Israel doesn't do that. Israel forcibly transfers people out of the Palestinian occupied territories to Israeli courts, right? So you're being arrested in Palestine, in the occupied territories, and they're not even trying you there. They're just taking you into Israel and doing it there. And then we talk about Article 76 It's the same principle, but with the prisons. So they don't jail you inside of occupied Palestine. They take you and jail you inside of Israel. So that's another violation, Article 76. So this is just scratching the surface of why it's bad and why it's illegal under international law. And the Israelis do it all the time. And then they call themselves a democracy. I don't know how arresting people and denying them due process, no charge, there's no trial, they're sent to a military court, and they're not even allowed to know why they're imprisoned. And it's renewed indefinitely. You call that fucking democratic? Are you high? Are you high? Who calls that democratic? You call that due process. You call that a democratic legislative body. What is that? This is another facet of how Palestinians live under occupation. And man, I want to show you some heartbreaking stuff. This is heartbreaking. I want to show you how this affects Palestinians so much. This is a short film made by Ad-Damir, which is one of the NGOs that's been declared a terrorist organization. I did an interview with Ad-Damir just last week. Actually, it was before Christmas, but it came out last week on my show on Press TV. Go watch it. Type the communique Richard Medhurst on Google. You'll find it. And they made this film 12 years ago. But it's just as true today as it was 12 years ago, as it was 24 years ago. Okay, so take a look at this. I mean, it's just heartbreaking.
هاي عاد الحج يوسف الموسى الغلمي. هاي مرت الحج يوسف سبتية ام محمد ابنها الآن موجود أبو يوسف في السجن.
Right? So she has 2 sons in prison. Her daughter is also in prison. And then over here he continues. They just cut it off for a second over here, but they continue. She's got like a bunch of grandchildren also. Yeah, a grandson is in prison. Her son-in-law is in prison. I mean, how awful is that? Honestly, how awful is that? This guy was in prison for under administrative detention. And look, he says, me, my family, my brother, my father, my wife, all of them have entered the prison. So his whole family arrested by the Israelis. Disgusting. So her son was in prison, this woman. She says the kids of my sister were also in prison, so her nieces. My nephew was imprisoned. Her son was in prison. This guy was in prison. All of these, we're talking administrative detention, so they don't even know why they're in jail. They have no clue. And let me show you how cruel this is even more, because I told you they can renew administrative detention every 6 months, right? The way that they've done it to these people, I mean, it's heartbreaking. Some of them have been at the prison gate. They think that they're about to get released, and then the Israelis send them back into jail. Some of them are already outside the prison. They're on the way home, and then they get stopped at a checkpoint, and the Israelis have renewed the administrative detention order, and they send them back to jail.
فيش أي شيء طفل شو صغير 16 سنة يوم اعتقاله طبق 16 سنة أحمد.
It's not a trial actually. The military commander decides that time that you can spend against the
وهذا اعتقال جائر يعني
جددوا لي مرة 7 مرات متتالية.
So do you see what he said here? They renewed my detention 7 times in a row. You do the math.
يعني عانيت من التجديد. جددوا لي مرة 7 مرات متتالية. 7 مرات متتالية. كل مرة 6 أشهر.
يعني زي واحد محكوم عليه بالإعدام عفوا يعني. أي بجوز يمددوا مرة ومرتين وثلاثة. ما حدا بيقدر يعرف. بعرف يعني ناس محكومين إداري يمكن قضوا 3-4 سنوات وهم حكم إداري.
حينما كانوا يعطوني الإداري أرجع إلى القسم يسألوني البنات ماذا حصل معك؟ أقول لهم ماذا يعني 6 شهور إداري 6 شهور إداري. هذه ال6 شهور أخذت من عمري ومن حياتي كثير شغلات حلوة أو مرة كثير يعني تأثرت فيه هال6 شهور.
Look at this guy. This guy 15 times. 15 times they renewed his administrative detention. Take a look at this.
8 تمديدات وفي الاعتقال الثاني 7 تمديدات يعني 15 تمديد في اعتقالين.
15 times. So he spent 7 7.5 years in prison, and he doesn't know why. I mean, I lost count, right? Because I just did an episode on this. I lost count all of these people in the video. How fucking heartbreaking is that, honestly? Can you imagine you go to jail for 7.5 years, you don't know why? I mean, again, the prisoners themselves, these people will tell you themselves that they're not trying to say that one, being sentenced to prison and sent there indefinitely, like one is worse than the other. They're both bad. But even like, in the United States, which has the biggest prison population in the world, at least you know when you're going to get out. They give you a sentence. And even here in occupied Palestine, they tell some people when they're going to get out. These people have no clue. They have no clue when they're getting out. I mean, that's Christ. That's just horrible, honestly. I wanted to show you the part where they said that they've been arrested on the way out, because that really got me, honestly. That really got me. Yeah, look, here it is.
محكمة وقالوا انحكمت 6 شهور والإفراج إن شاء الله ب2/8 بنفس السنة. ب2/8 ما أفرجش عنها.
الإنسان هو وأهله وزوجته وأولاده بتهيئوا لعملية الإفراج. وبتفاجأ الإنسان في آخر لحظة، في آخر يوم، في آخر ساعة إنه بهيئ نفسه للترويحة وبودعوه الشباب في السجن، فبيجي على الفاكس قرار تمديد 6 أشهر. يعني أكثر من مرة رجعوني عن الباب.
ممكن تطلع في الباص وينكلوك توصل لحد الحاجز، وعلى الحاجز يعودوا يرجعوك تحت شعار انه شو اجاك 6 اشهر جديده، اجى عليك مواد جديده.
طفل احمد ويحكموه اداري والله اعلم وين يطلع.
في الاعتقال الاول 8.
I mean, it's really messed up, And this is just one part of the occupation. It's just, I mean, we've done a couple of segments now on the Palestinians. This is just one part of it. And then these fucking the fucking Israelis, they have the stones to come and talk about democracy and that they treat Palestinians equal. Fucking bullshit. Bullshit from top to bottom. Never heard a bigger lie in my life. This is evil. Like, this video is it's about 30 minutes long, and it's heartbreaking by itself. And then you look at what's happening in Sheikh Jarrah this morning, where they're bulldozing homes. Like, I don't think there's a single Palestinian family that hasn't been crushed and hurt by the occupation, either today or 40 years ago, 50 years ago. And it's just mind-boggling, how the Jews who went through so much suffering in World War II and before that in history can come and some of them can do that to the Palestinians. It's mind-boggling. I don't understand it. I don't understand it. So the lesson from all this is that this is administrative detention is really a practice that comes from British colonial rule, and the Israelis are happy to keep it. They're happy to keep it and use it against the Palestinians. And I think this is one of the most barbaric practices. It's one, this is something that the Israelis and the Americans and the Europeans, they'll say that, North Korea does this stuff, and the Soviets do this stuff. The Syrians do this stuff. The Iranians do this stuff, right? The secret police will come and arrest you, right? And they call everyone else authoritarian. What is this? What is this? If you're, just logically, if you're so sure that these people are a risk to national security, shouldn't you be able to charge them and prove it? They don't even care. They just don't give a shit. They're obviously not a risk to anyone, because if they let you out of prison and you're already on the way home and then they decide to stop you at a checkpoint and send you back, like they changed their mind at the last second, what is that? They don't even do that in the United States, which has, again, the biggest prison population on earth, which has a rigged criminal justice system, an injustice system. Unbelievable. It's really like some kind of, you know, it's really just it destroys your psychology, your family. It's horrible. So, you know, that's why these guys who are on hunger strike, you understand why they go on hunger strike for, you know, like 140 days. You get why they get to a state like this. And that's what they're driven to, because they're held, they're imprisoned, no idea why. They're not allowed to know. There's a secret file. And that's why these guys went on hunger strike. But again, the problem is that the problem is that they could get released, and then the Israelis could just throw them back in jail. If you paid attention, one of the people in the video I just showed you, this guy, he said, my first arrest, they renewed it 7 times, and for the second arrest, 8 times. So he was arrested on 2 different secret files. So they made up 2 different charges, and he doesn't know either one. So he's gone to jail 2 times, right? He's done the first time 7 times 6, right? So 42 months. And then after that, he did 6 times 8 months. So in total, he spent about 7 years in jail. And both of the times, he has no clue why. Barbaric. I really don't know. I don't have the words, man. And then, you know, this is the kind of stuff that Keir Starmer, the Labour leader, this is the kind of stuff that the British support. The British helped create it. You know, it's really not surprising that administrative detention comes from the British, because Israel itself was put in place by the British. The Balfour Declaration, 1917, they very clearly, openly said that, you know, this is going to be, they're going to make a Jewish homeland in Palestine, right? Like as if it's theirs to give away. And of course, Britain still supports Israel, just as the United States does. Here's the mother of Miqdad Qawasme, one of the prisoners who was on hunger strike. You can see like the kind of state that she's in as well because of his health. This was on October 24th, so it's 3 months ago now. But still, I want to show to you the effect it has on the family as well, because the family understand why the prisoner is on hunger strike. They support it, and they are there as much as they can be at their side. Again, they're not allowed to visit them, but nevertheless, it's heartbreaking, you know.
دهر بعدين مرة واحدة اختلف.
I'm just going to refresh. I don't know why it cut off. Excuse me, 1 second. There we go.
في زيارته كان وضع أهون من دهر بعدين مرة واحدة اختلف صار وجه أصفر على الآخر وشفايفه بيض وباردة جدا ودرجة حرارته منخفضة وهي مرتفعة على المونيتور. درجة حرارته فوق 38.
So I mean, when you don't eat for so long, you're on your 105th or whatever it is day of hunger strike, which many of them they pass the 100-day mark. You can die at any moment. Your organs can fail at any moment. Your temperature is up and down. You can barely speak. It's really horrible. It's really distressing for the family. Again, it's really an archaic, barbaric practice, what they do, the Israelis, and I'm not surprised the British created it. Obviously, it's not unique to them, but the fact that they've kept this British colonial law from the Defense Emergency Regulations in 1945 and continue it to this day, I mean, it tells you everything, it really does. So, if you'll excuse me a second, I just need to get the next segment ready for you. If you guys would be so kind to give me a moment, I'm just going to get some water as well. I'll put up this as a screen and I'll be right back. Don't go anywhere. I've got a lot of more interesting segments for you, a lot of interesting things to cover. I'll be right back. Alrighty. All right, guys, we're back. So I'm just getting the next segment ready. If you'll give me a moment. I mean, you can look at me doing it or just watch the donation screen. I don't... It's up to you guys what you prefer. Just give me a moment. So... Oh, Christ, this one. Okay. Oh boy, I've been excited to cover this. It's not exactly pleasant, but you know, I've been wanting to tell you about this. I'm assuming some of you saw this story. I don't know about the rest of you. Give me a second. Crikey. Okay. So just before I get into it, I have to plug the show. I haven't plugged the show. I don't know how long we've been streaming, but again, we're starting a new year. It's 2022. I can't believe how far we've come. I'm speechless. And it's all thanks to you guys. I don't want to make a whole speech. I just want to say thank you for supporting this channel and other independent news channels. It goes a long way to, you know, fighting not just big tech who've given YouTube and other platforms away to the corporate news media, but helping us also fight back ourselves with real news and fighting their disinformation. You know, these channels, they exist to start wars, and it's thanks to you guys that we can do that. So again, I don't want to make a speech. Just thank you for supporting the show. Again, I've put up the donation screen here. If you want to donate, you can just scan the QR code with your phone with the camera. There's Venmo, CashApp, PayPal, and you can also donate on YouTube Super Chat. And of course, if you have any questions, I'll answer them. I'll try my best. And also, if you have any comments, I'll read them too. So thank you very much for that. And of course, it really goes a long way if you can support the show on Patreon for whatever you choose, $2 a month, $5. It makes absolutely no difference. I appreciate every single cent, and it's thanks to you guys that I can do this. So thank you so much. There's Substack also. You can also contribute there if you want monthly. And yeah, of course, there's a crab dance. If you guys join, we usually play a crab dance. It's been a while. It's been too long, in fact. So I hope some of you join on Patreon. It's our ritual here. It's our tradition that we play a crab dance when someone joins on Patreon. And it will be my honor to play it for you. Okay, so just a second. We're going to go into the next segment. Okay. Are you ready for this guy? Oh boy. Tony Blair, the former British Prime Minister and Labour leader. He's been knighted by the Queen. He's going to receive a knighthood. So this was announced on New Year's. Here's a headline from The Guardian. Tony Blair to be given most senior knighthood in New Year's honours list. The former Prime Minister will be made Knight Companion of the Most Noble Order of the Garter by the Queen. So, I mean, I don't even know where to start. Where do I begin with this? If this headline makes you want to vomit, you're not alone. In fact, many people are disgusted that the Queen would deem Tony Blair fit for a knighthood. Tony Blair's most famous contribution to humanity was slaughtering 1 million Iraqis and making millions more refugees, right? So when he partnered with George Bush, as you remember, he committed the UK to the United States invasion of Iraq in 2003. Millions of people came out to protest in the streets of London. Didn't matter. He went ahead with it anyway. And that's his legacy. He's a war criminal. And he, of course, escaped any sense of justice, right? So the High Court protected him from prosecution, of course. And he's free, right? but the Queen thinks that he should get a knighthood. Well, a lot of people disagree. As a matter of fact, there's a petition that was launched on change.org. Look how many people signed this. 1.2 million people have signed a petition for Tony Blair to have his Knight Companion of the Most Noble Order of the Garter rescinded. To have his knighthood cancelled, in other words. Now, Tony Blair actually was asked about this. So he was on Times Radio, and he was asked about the knighthood and people's reaction to it. Let me play you this clip, and let's see what Tony had to say.
Okay, let's move on to discuss your knighthood briefly before we get on to COVID, which is what we really want to talk to you about. Congratulations, you are now Sir Tony. Is that what we should be calling you?
Well, I'm perfectly happy with Tony, as a matter of fact, because it's what feels most natural to me. Look, it was very gracious of the Queen to bestow the honour, and I accepted. In a way, not for myself as a person, but because of the government that I led, and on behalf of the people who work with me, who were dedicated, committed people who provided a lot of change to the country. And of course, it's not. There would be people who object to it strongly. That's to be expected, but there it is.
No, you're a KG, which is Order of the Garter, which is obviously the most senior order of knighthood in the British honour system. In fact, you only outranked by holders of the Victoria Cross. It's a personal gift of the sovereign as well, but it has taken you 14 years to get it. Why so long?
Well, I think it feels more right now, actually, than it would have in previous years. So, I mean, the honest answer is these are not decisions that I take, but in any event, it's happened, and you know, as I say, it's a very it's a very good honor to have. But it really represents, not really me as a person. It represents the fact that I was Prime Minister of the government, and that's how I understand it and take it.
No, you did make reference to this, I think, but you're clearly aware of this petition that exists now calling for the removal of your knighthood. It's collected above 1 million signatures, getting from 1.25 million signatures. Does that upset you?
I expect, you know, a lot of opposition. If you're Prime Minister for 10 years, and you know, there are some people who want to say the only thing the government did was Iraq and ignore all the rest of the things we do, and for those people, you know, they obviously feel very strongly. But in the end, you know, you don't, especially in today's politics, you don't occupy a position of leadership and take decisions without arousing a lot of opposition. And so it didn't surprise me. And, you know, again, the best thing is just to accept that of course there will be people who strongly oppose it and you know, detest me for various reasons. And this is just what happens in politics.
Christ. I love how he's trying to casually brush it off. Like, you know, it's normal for people to hate you when you're in government for so long. And, you know, that's just, no, it's not normal for you to, like, slaughter 1 million Iraqis. That's not normal. There's nothing normal about what you did, you goon. You goddamn demon. Look at him. He's a bloody demon. I mean, this guy is easily one of the most hated people on earth, you know, next to George Bush. Easily. And you really have to suck. You really have to be hated by a large portion of humans for 1 million people to sign a petition to have your knighthood rescinded. I mean, he his answer about why it took so long, I have my suspicions why it took so long. Because if the Queen had given this any earlier, I think, you know, the Iraq War would have been even more present in people's minds. Right? Unfortunately, you have younger generations now who have no clue who Tony Blair is, right? So basically, my point here is that they wait until the heat dies down, right? Now it's 2022. The Iraq War is almost 20 years ago now, the invasion, 19 years ago, March 2003. And so they're probably hoping that people forgot. No, buddy, we haven't forgot. No, we have not forgot. So this is really disgusting, honestly. It really makes, you know, it's kind of like those things with the Nobel Peace Prize. They just start giving it to, like, Henry Kissinger and Barack Obama. It just becomes like a piece of shit. Hold on, let me show you this. This is the Tony Blair that I remember, and I think this is the Tony Blair that most people remember, right? So this is what he told George Bush when he was writing him little letters, right? Before they started destroying the Middle East. So he said, "I'm with you, whatever," right? "I'll be with you, whatever." That's what Tony Blair was telling George Bush. And it's true, he meant it, right? Look how many lies the Tony Blair government invented. They made up this claim about Saddam Hussein being able to mount an attack in 45 minutes, right? Like he can magically in 45 minutes deploy any WMD, biological weapons. He has special trucks that carry, special anthrax labs on them. You name it. They just made everything up. And so, yeah, he meant it. That "I'll be with you, whatever." And I saw some people who were basically disgusted by this from another point of view. They were disgusted that, their sons were sent by Tony Blair in the British Army to be killed in Iraq. I mean, yes, obviously that's a problem, but the primary victims are the Iraqis, in case I need to point that out for some people. But, this is something that we're still living through today. The Iraq War changed the region forever. It helped create ISIS. It gave rise to Al-Qaeda. The bloodshed that Iraq has known is unbelievable. It's unimaginable. It's a rabbit hole of atrocities, what happened to Iraq. And he's responsible for this. He's absolutely responsible for this. So if that gets you a knighthood, what does that say about being knighted, about people who are knighted, about the Queen? What does that say about this order? What does that mean when Tony Blair gets one? Because that is his legacy, whether he likes it or not. And when he says like, "Oh, well, people act like people don't remember the other things, they just want to remember the Iraq War." Hey, you brought that upon yourself. What else do you want people to remember? You murdered millions of people. You turned people into refugees. The Middle East is still screwed up because of what you did today. Today, we're still in the consequences of what you did. Right? The war in Syria is one of those things. When ISIS is starting in Iraq and Syria and spilling over, that's a consequence of what you did. Iraq is still under occupation. No matter what the Americans want to call it. Oh, we're removing the combat troops, or they changed the name of combat troops to advisors. It's under occupation. There are American bases in Iraq. Afghanistan, that's also Tony Blair, right? So that Biden withdrew troops from Afghanistan, allegedly. We don't know what the CIA is doing there still. So that ended just a few months ago, supposedly. 20 years of war. Tony Blair is also part of that. That's also his legacy. He is George Bush's right-hand man, notwithstanding Dick Cheney, but he's his British right-hand man when it comes to this Western attack on the Middle East, on Afghanistan, this destruction of the entire region. We're really talking about one of the biggest atrocities of the century. Easily, without a doubt. This entire war on terror wasn't done only by the United States. It was launched by the United States, certainly, but the UK was part of this so-called coalition of the willing. And this man, Tony Blair, is responsible for the misery of so many people. We won't even know how many. We will never know exactly how many. And I want to show you the response from the current Labour leader, Keir Starmer, right, who is as charming as a bookshelf. So let's take a look at what he has to say about this.
Boris Johnson has faced criticism for failing to implement further COVID.
Hold on, let me get to the part where they talk about Tony, because it's a long video.
Want him not
Here
just
we go.
you, isn't it? Very much indeed. So this is a bit of a thorny political problem for you, isn't it? The knighthood given to the former Labour leader, Tony Blair. What do you make of the fact that more than 500,000 people want him not just not to have it, but to be stripped of it now he's been given it?
Well, look, I don't think it's a thorny issue for me at all. I think Tony Blair deserves the honour. He He won 3 elections. He was a very successful prime minister. I haven't got time this morning to list all of his many achievements, which I think vastly improved our country, you know, whether that's minimum wage, sure start for young families. But the one I would pick out in particular is the work he did in Northern Ireland and the peace process and the huge change that has made. I worked for myself in Northern Ireland for 6 years with the police service over there, and I saw for myself the profound impact it had on peace, on both communities in Northern Ireland. So I don't think it's thorny at all. I think he deserves the honour. Obviously, I respect the fact that people have different views.
Yeah, but not just different views, Sakir. The fact of the matter is the Iraq war is a huge thorn in the side, not just of Tony Blair, but of the Labour Party. I mean, many people blame the catastrophe over the Iraq war for the fact that Labour can't get anywhere near power right now. The Shilcott inquiry said the judgments about the severity of the threat posed by Iraq's weapons of mass destruction was presented with a certainty that was not justified. The planning and preparations for Iraq after Saddam Hussein were wholly inadequate. I mean, worse than that, you know, there are families of those who died fighting who are furious about this honour for Sir Tony Blair and, of course, the cost in lives to the people of Iraq.
Which some reports have at 600,000 civilians.
Yeah, look, I understand there are strong views on the Iraq war. There were back in at the time, there still are. But that doesn't detract from the fact that Tony Blair was a very successful Prime Minister of this country, made huge differences to the lives of millions of people in this country, won 3 elections, and therefore I think...
Yeah, mate, he also made huge differences for millions of people in Iraq. He fucking killed them. Christ. I mean, just listen to Starmer. Do you understand now why Jeremy Corbyn was driven out of the Labour Party by people like Starmer and the other Blairites? Because you have a legacy of Tony Blair that still lives on in the Labour Party that makes sure that you cannot have a nice anti-imperialist socialist government under Corbyn that actually stops feeding Israel protection, money, that stops bombing the Middle East. They can't have that. They want this imperialism to keep going. They can't have any sort of deviation from US and Western foreign policy. And so they had to do away with him, right? And Keir Starmer, of course, he's totally complicit in that, absolutely complicit. He took away, first of all, he suspended Corbyn from the party, from the Labour Party, and took away the whip. So Corbyn still hasn't had his whip restored. I mean, they basically castrated him politically, right? And it's really because you have a large chunk of the Labour Party made up of these Blairites who are just as nasty as Tony Blair, right? And even right now in his response, you can see how he's saying like, yeah, well, you know, the Iraq war is really controversial, but there are other things like, no. This is not like some kind of, it balanced itself out. No. The Iraq war is a stain. Nothing Tony Blair did, even if good by any stretch of the imagination, can take away from that. The fact that he thinks it's like some kind of side issue, like, yeah, you know, there's mixed feelings. There's people on both sides. What both sides? It's a war of aggression. You killed a bunch of people on fake cooked intelligence. You cooked that intelligence. The Downing Street dossier, all of this stuff. 45 minutes from attack. They cooked this, and none of them have been held accountable. The only person in jail, right now relating to the Iraq war is Julian Assange. I don't need to tell you that. Really, just disgusting. You know, it really is disgusting. I don't know what to say. This is apparently the opposition. Well, I can tell you something. They're not much of an opposition. You know, Labour's only purpose right now is helping the Tory government pass all kinds of authoritarian laws, right? So they've given immunity for British troops from war crimes prosecutions, right? So if British troops commit war crimes older than 5 years, there's no prosecution. Labour barely, they do nothing. They don't stand in the way. They just let it go through Parliament. When it comes to the Spy Cops bill, letting the undercover police kill, rape, torture, do whatever they like, they also let that through. Nationality and Borders bill. This is a fake opposition. And now, of course, the police crime sentencing and courts bill. So that's why we have the kill the bill protests. They let all of this through. There's no opposition party in the UK. That's not an opposition. It's the same thing kind of setup where you have Democrats and Republicans. Same setup. They're working together behind the scenes. And so I'm you know, this is why people are leaving the Labour Party in droves, because it's gone back to its Blairite roots, if we can say that. It's gone back to what it is, which is a fake opposition. It's part of the establishment, pro-war, pro-imperialism, pro-privatization. You know, they're all working together with the Tories to screw over people. That's what it is. And I'm not surprised at all that Keir Starmer would say such a thing, right? He's also, he calls himself a Zionist without qualification. What does that tell you? What does that tell you? He's just a standard establishment hack. That's what he is. He's a standard British politician. He's a standard British politician. He's playing the game. He's playing the game. And you will see him be knighted too one day. Just like Blair. If you play the game, you do what you're told. You don't stand in the way of the wars. You don't stand in the way of Western hegemony. You don't stand in the way of British interests. British imperialism, neo-imperialism, neo-colonialism. You get knighted. That's what you get. You get rewarded for playing ball, for playing along with the system. And that's what this knighthood with Tony Blair is about. And it's good to see a lot of public outrage. People should be outraged. And I've heard George Galloway. I've seen him post on Twitter. Again, George Galloway is a real one. George Galloway is a real one. You know, he was there in the party when the Iraq war was about to happen. He opposed it. George Galloway has always been a real one. And he knows exactly who Tony Blair is. And George Galloway was talking about the knighthood, and he said that he would be prepared to go and crash the ceremony to stop it from happening. I don't know what's going on with that. I need to update myself on whether on what's happening with that. But, you know, it just gives you another idea of Galloway's character. Disgusting. I'm at a loss for words. I've said disgusting 15 times now because that's what it is. And can I just say one thing? That picture they showed of him here.
I think he deserves the honour. I respect.
I think he deserves the honour. Christ. Look at this picture over here. Where is it? We were just looking at it a few moments ago. Oh God. He looks like a vampire. He looks like a demon. He looks like he looks like a monster, and that's what he is, and that's what Tony Blair will always be. He looks like a monster because he is a monster, and he has the blood of Iraqis, of Syrians, of everyone whose life has been destroyed, were taken away by the war on terror, the so-called war on terror, and all the other things that Britain has supported, right? That's his legacy. That is who Tony Blair is. So speaking of warmongering, I want to show you something else, which again you've probably seen on the news now. Very similar, reminds me a little bit of Iraq, not entirely, but certainly a little bit. All right, let me break this down for you. So the United States is fear-mongering about Russia invading Ukraine. So they keep saying that Russia is about to invade Ukraine, and Russia keeps saying, no, we're not, actually, we don't have any plans to invade Ukraine, this is not true. And then Blinken and Biden come back and say, no, but it's true, they're going to invade Ukraine at any moment. So, I mean, a lot of similarities with the usual fear-mongering, honestly. Just look at the headlines. Let's take a look at the headlines that you'll find when you look this up, okay? Here's from NPR. As tension over Ukraine continues, Russia says it has no plans to stage attack. Oh, well, okay. Thank you for telling us the truth. Now let's go look at another headline. Russian troops begin leaving Kazakhstan over government restores control. Great. So we're having a little truth, which doesn't sound like the warmongering, because Blinken was saying that once you have Russians in your house, it's very difficult to get them to leave. Take a listen.
There are very particular drivers of what's happening in Kazakhstan right now, as I said, that go to economic and political matters. And what's happening in there is different from what's happening on Ukraine's borders. Having said that, I think one lesson of recent history is that once Russians are in your house, it's sometimes very difficult to get them to leave.
So again, that completely contradicts what he said, because when Russia was in Kazakhstan, they've already left. They were there barely a week and they left. So that doesn't matter because they're not interested in the truth, okay? So just see the contrast with the headlines. If you look up the headlines, this is what you'll get, okay? Russia-Ukraine conflict escalates. How close are Russia and Ukraine to war? Russia-Ukraine crisis, why Brussels fears Europe is closest. Is Russia preparing to invade Ukraine? US weighs more military support for Ukraine to resist Russia. So the media are fixated on this idea that Russia is about to invade Ukraine. And why are they saying this? They're saying this because Russia has moved Russian troops inside Russia. So Russia is moving its own troops inside its own borders. And apparently, that's a threat to Ukraine and it's a threat to the United States. Again, with this hysteria, right? So it's not the United States that poses a threat to Russia with all its NATO bases, right? I don't need to show you the expansion over the years. They've basically encircled Russia with bases as part of NATO, and then of course they had them in Afghanistan. No. It's Russia that's threatening the United States. Now, if you ask me, this sounds a lot like the fear-mongering before Iraq. Because right now they're saying that Russia could invade at any moment. Right? That's what Blinken is saying. Russia could invade at any moment. That sounds a lot like Saddam can attack in 45 minutes. You remember that lie, which they peddled over and over? That sounds the same thing to me. And once again, you see the double standard, how it's okay for the United States to encircle Russia with bases, to encircle China with bases, to encircle Iran with bases. But if Russia moves its own troops inside its own border, they make a giant story out of it. Then Russia is the problem, apparently. Right? It's the same kind of behavior when Iran shoots down a US drone that's entered Iranian airspace illegally. Iran is a threat. Well, what do you mean? You're the one on Iran's doorstep. You're the one on Russia's doorstep, not the other way around. The last time that Soviet missiles were in Cuba, when there was a Cuban Missile Crisis during the Cold War, they flipped out. You still learn about that in history books to this day. You still learn about this 60 years later because of what a threat it was to the United States. But it's totally fine for the United States to regularly put bases around Russia. That's okay. No worries. Let me show you this map over here of NATO expansion, okay? So they had a deal in so many words that NATO would not expand after 1997, right? But that's not true because ever since, NATO has been expanding. So they've been getting closer and closer. Let me show you this interactive map over here. So they founded NATO in 1949, as you remember. And over the years, it's just grown and grown larger. And at the end of the Cold War, there was the sense that, okay, well, you know, you can stop expanding closer. You don't need to encircle us. It's fine. No, they don't get the message. They've just continued, right? And so Russia is asking the Americans not to let Ukraine join NATO, okay? So the Russians don't want Ukraine to join NATO because then they would have a NATO country, NATO missiles, NATO weapons, NATO forces on their doorstep. And the United States' response to that is it's a non-starter. It's out of the question. So again, let me get this straight. The United States is leaving the door open for Ukraine to join NATO, and they're fine with having NATO troops on Russia's border. But Russia moving its own troops inside its own border with Ukraine, that's a problem. So, I mean, what kind of a twisted double standard is that? What kind of a twisted double standard is that? I want to show you something over here. This is a very good example. This is Max Abrams. He said, do you want to know how biased American media is? Imagine if Trump had said he's cool with Russia doing a minor incursion into Ukraine.
So I think what you're going to see is that Russia will be held accountable if it invades. And it depends on what it does. It's one thing if it's a minor incursion and then we end up having a fight about what to do and not do, etc. So I think what you're going to see.
Yeah, he said that. So apparently Biden is saying, well, you know, if Russia does a minor incursion in Ukraine, that's something else. You know, we'll weigh our options then. Imagine if Trump had said that. You remember how they used to accuse Trump of being a Putin puppet and he's being weak in front of Putin and he's criticizing the U.S.-owned intelligence agencies. He doesn't trust them, but he trusts Putin. All kinds of stories, right? To this day, they're still pushing this Russiagate nonsense. If Trump had said that, they would go bananas. They would say, you're going to let Russia do a minor incursion into Ukraine? Oh my God, you Kremlin agent, you Putin puppet. But Biden says it, they don't care. Not a word. Just to show you a little double standard there. I want to show you something else now. This is a clip from Tucker Carlson. Okay, just take a look. It's 10 seconds. Listen to what he says.
Why are the Russians so upset? Why are we moving towards some kind of conflict? Well, there's one reason. Over a number of different administrations, the United States government has pushed Ukraine to join NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. Imagine if Mexico fell under the direct military control of China. We would see that as a threat, of course. There'd be no reason for that. Well, that's how Russia views NATO control of Ukraine, and why wouldn't they? We don't get anything out of pushing Ukraine into NATO, so why are we doing this? Clinton, why are the Russians so upset? Why are we moving towards...
Exactly. He makes a very valid point. Tucker Carlson or not, that's a very valid point. If Mexico was under China's control, the United States would lose it. Just like they lost it with the Cuban Missile Crisis, right? Oh my God, there are Soviet missiles 90 miles, off of the coast of Florida. But it's okay for the U.S. to encircle Iran. It's okay for the U.S. to encircle China. And with AUKUS now, it's okay for the U.S. to encircle Russia in Eastern Europe and then also in Afghanistan, which is nearby. And now with Ukraine potentially joining NATO, that's okay. It's okay for the U.S. to encircle everyone else with drones, missiles, planes, tanks, you name it. But it's not okay for Russia to exercise its own sovereignty inside its own territory. Wow. Let me break this down very simply for you. The United States does not care one bit about Ukraine. This has nothing to do with Ukraine or Ukraine's sovereignty or whatever else they're trying to fearmonger about. This is to do with expanding NATO. They want to encircle Russia with more bases. They want to gain the upper hand, and they want to make Russia feel uncomfortable. That's what it is. It's about expanding U.S. hegemony. That's what it is. It's just like what with AUKUS. Like a few months ago, Biden creating this military alliance with the UK and with the US, with Australia, right? So they're going to build these nuclear-powered submarines for Australia. And basically, they frame it as, it's going to add stability for the Indo-Pacific. It's nothing to do with that. The Indo-Pacific doesn't need more US and UK and Australian warships. It's about antagonizing China. And this is the same thing. It's just like when the US talks about Uyghur Muslims. The US has spent decades killing Muslims. They have a jail in Guantanamo Bay. This is just for Muslim men that are held without charge or trial. And now you're going to tell me they care about Muslims? They're doing that to antagonize China. And when they say they support the Kurds, they don't care about the Kurds in Syria or anywhere else. They're using them to antagonize the Syrian government and to further their agenda to take the oil. And then when they don't care, when they don't have any more use for the Kurds, they'll drop them. When they don't have any more use for the Uyghurs, they'll drop them. When they don't have any more use for the Ukrainians, they'll drop them too. That's what the U.S. does. So this has nothing to do with Ukraine or Ukraine's sovereignty. Nonsense. Let me show you the reaction to this Tucker Carlson clip, right? So this person here says, this isn't journalism, it's an ongoing FARA violation. Tucker Carlson needs to be prosecuted as an unregistered agent of the Russian Federation and treason under Article 3, Section 3, Clause 1 of the U.S. Constitution for aiding an enemy in hybrid warfare against the United States. Christ. Just because you don't like the guy, it doesn't make him a Russian agent. I mean, how do you throw out such a loaded accusation like that at someone? You have no proof for that, literally no proof. And I got to agree with Glenn here, right? So look at what Glenn tweeted. He said, imprison your political enemies under sedition laws, prosecute journalists for treason, and failing that, use state power to coerce Silicon Valley oligarchs to censor and ban your enemies from speaking on the internet, to save democracy and fight fascism. He's, of course, being sarcastic. He's mimicking what Democrats and liberals would say. They're authoritarians. Look how they go after Julian Assange. Jail. Send him to jail 175 years. Look how they accuse anyone they don't like of being a Russian agent. I mean, this is lunacy. This is absolute lunacy. And then they want to throw them in jail as well. They just make up allegations. They just make shit up. They make the wildest things up. And then that's again, their ad hominem attacks. Like, did this person even address what the guy's saying about Mexico? There's nothing there. It's nothing at all. And that it's a very real point. If the U.S. was encircled with the military or a military alliance from another country, they would lose it. So why should other countries accept when the U.S. encircles them? This is a very, 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 very powerful and sound and logic argument. I don't care who made it. But they can't answer that because they're imperialists, they're authoritarians, and that's it. That's who these people are. And then they pretend that they're fighting fascism and they're democratic. What a joke. What an absolute joke. So, again, I mean, just look at these headlines. How they're fanning the flames of war. They're dying to support any war, right? This is the BBC. Ukraine tension. Blinken says Russia could attack at short notice, right? U.S. weighs more military support for Ukraine to resist Russia if it invades. U.S. warns Russia is sounding drumbeats of war against Ukraine. Is war now more likely? This reminds me of Iraq, right? So they were just openly saying, well, look, man, Saddam has these weapons and we have to go in and we got to do something. It's imminent. He's going to attack any second. It's the same thing with Russia. Oh my God, Russia's going to attack any second. Quick, we have to send weapons. We have to help the Ukrainians. We got to be ready to go to war. And that's how they manufacture consent. That's how they get you to accept this aggression against another country. They manufacture these threats. There is no threat. They don't care that they don't care that Russia is openly saying they're not going to do anything with Ukraine. Look, this is the Deputy Foreign Minister. Look what he says.
Another example of how hard it is to read Russian intentions.
There is no risk of a larger scale war to start to unfold in Europe or elsewhere. We do not want and will not take any action of aggressive character. We will not attack, strike, invade, quote unquote, whatever, Ukraine.
After today's meetings, Secretary Blinken heads to Berlin.
I mean, that was pretty clear to me. He said, we will not attack or invade Ukraine. What more do you want? No, it's not good enough. There's war. The Russians are going to attack any second. And so when you see things like this, where Blinken is saying that, oh, well, once the Russians are in your house, it's very difficult to get them to leave. And then the Russians actually leave, within a week after coming to Kazakhstan. You're not going to hear much about that because it goes against their narrative. And then, of course, when Russia is saying that there are no plans of any kind of attack, they have no plans with Ukraine, just as I showed you, the Deputy Foreign Minister said, they don't care either. It's like it just goes over their heads. It goes in one ear and out the other. I really have trouble trying to discern whether they're just dishonest or stupid. So you can see, once again, the media, how it works in tandem with the U.S. government to fan the flames of war, to manufacture threats that are not real. How many times do we have to see this? Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan. It's just over and over. So, the U.S. is supporting neo-Nazi groups inside Russia. I don't hear the media complaining about those. They don't say that that's anti-Semitic. They just don't care. And then, of course, there was a resolution in the UN not long ago to condemn Nazism. You know who voted against it? Israel and the United States. What? Yes. What does that tell you? Christ. I don't even know what to make of that. I certainly know what to make of it with the United States because they don't care about condemning Nazism. They're supporting neo-Nazi groups in Ukraine. They're fine with it. It's just like they go and support Al-Qaeda in Syria. They're fine with it. They don't really care. Ideological enemy, they attacked our embassies. This is nonsense. If it serves their interests, they'll get in bed with anyone. That's U.S. policy. So Russia is not... Also, the whole idea that, Russia is some kind of threat to the region and some kind of world threat. I mean, you just finished a 20-year invasion of Afghanistan, and that's just Afghanistan. The war on terror is dozens of other countries. There's Iraq, there's Syria. They've used the AUMF of 2002 to bomb 19 countries. That's just the ones we know about, right? You have 800 military bases. The U.S. has 800 military bases. Russia has 20 around the world. But yeah, okay, I guess Russia's the problem for world peace, right? With their 20 military bases, not the US with 800 military bases, all over Africa, all over the Middle East, just doing coups left and right. No, it's Russia. Russia. I can already hear Rachel Maddow, see, she's about to explode. Oh man, these people, they love war. They just can't stop. They're not happy until there's bloodshed and there's money flowing into Raytheon. That's the way they do it. That's the way they are. And they need the liberals and Democrats, they need this to feed their whole Russiagate nonsense, to keep this idea alive that Russia is a threat. And so, Russia is a threat domestically in the United States, and it's a threat also to the United States allies. As if they act as if Ukraine is one of one of the 50 states. I mean, what am I supposed to say? The warmongering is endless. So really, just pay attention to how the media go along with this. They don't actually apply any scrutiny. You go read these articles where they're saying that an attack is imminent from Russia. They don't tell you that Russia has clearly said they're not interested in any of this. They don't try to give you an objective picture of what's going on. That the U.S. has hundreds of military bases, has invaded tons of countries. Russia is not interested in doing that. No. Why would they do that? Why would the media say anything honest about Russia or, a country the United States doesn't like? That's treason, isn't it? Christ. I'm really getting so sick of this warmongering. I'm so sick. Like, how many wars do we have to see them start? How many? It's disgusting. They're full of bloodlust, I want to talk to you about well, actually, first of all, let me read some of your donations, some of your comments. A bunch of you sent some things. Let me just load them, and then I'll get to the next segment. Give me a second. So Mass Casualties sent a donation saying, "Great to see you again, Richard. Keep spitting truth and facts. Solidarity with Palestine, Syria, Yemen, Iran, China, Russia, Cuba, Belarus, Venezuela, Nicaragua, Bolivia, DPRK, and the rest of the anti-imperialist bloc. Amen. Power to the axis of resistance." And thank you for supporting the show. It's good to see you as well, Mass. And we have another one here from Cryptomeria. It says solidarity. Thank you very much, solidarity. And we have another one from Omar. It says, "Thank you for bringing attention to this issue. Keep fighting." Of course. Thank you, Omar, very much. Thank you all for supporting the show and for your kind words. I really appreciate it. I think we also got some donations on PayPal. Let me pull those up for you as well and read them. Hold on a second. So we got a donation over here from Liz. Says, "Thank you for the great show. Keep up the great work." Thank you, Liz. I appreciate it very much. And also, we have 2 people who signed up on Patreon, which is great. Thank you guys very much for supporting the show. I'll play you a crab dance in a second. Put your hands together for Joe. Thank you, Joe. And Mark. I don't know if I should say your last names. I just assume most people don't want me to, so I always just say your first names. But thank you very much, Joe and Mark. This crab dance is just for you.
Clap for that, you stupid bastard. And Corn Pop was a bad dude. And he ran a bunch of bad boys.
Listen, fuckhead, you have fucking crossed the line, claiming I'm the enemy. You got that, you goddamn son of a bitch?
I don't give a fuck what you think, bitch.
Good morning. Sunday morning.
Cut that bitch out.
Thank you for Iron Dome, which is a technical marvel.
والله انتوا كلاب بصراحة يعني. ماشي نشتغل عادي.
We lied, we cheated, we stole.
Why you text Why? You're getting nervous, man. Calm down. It's okay. Okay.
Suck my dick and choke on it. I yield my time. Fuck you.
All right. Oh, man. That's so refreshing. Thank you, guys. Thank you for bringing on the crab dance. If you guys want to support the show, please do. You can donate as little as $2, even $1 a month on Patreon. You know, everyone donates something different. You can put in your own amount, and it would really go a long way. Thank you so much for supporting the show. I really couldn't do this without you. Also, on GoFundMe, we're so close to hitting the goal. We're so close to hitting the mark. Thank you so much to everyone who's donated on the GoFundMe for the technical upgrades. That one specifically for the tech upgrades. Man, really, this is. I remember. It's not last year. Now it's 2022. Now it's technically 2 years ago. But I remember when I still got this microphone arm. And I got a battery for the camera. I mean, I was over the moon, right? That was like, for me, it's like, I don't have to change the battery now. So that was really good. Thank you, guys. You know, since the beginning, I'm doing this thanks to you. I'm so grateful. Really. Every cent counts. I'm just humbled. So I'll just put all the links below. There's Patreon and the GoFundMe also is below. And if you want to donate on PayPal or CashApp or Venmo, you can do that here too. Thank you so much. And you know, if you have questions or comments, go ahead. I'll answer them for you or read them for you. If I can manage to get them all, I try my best every time. So let me take you guys on to the next segment. Give me a second to set it up. Right. So Syria has joined China's Belt and Road Initiative, which is also known as the New Silk Road. This is really big. This is really very significant news because Syria, as you guys know, has been, under terrible attack for 10 years. There's been a war on Syria, and Syria's destroyed. It needs reconstruction. Syria is also under brutal U.S. sanctions under the Caesar Act. So just by joining the Belt and Road Initiative, this means China is going to be involved in Syria's reconstruction. And that's very important at the moment. And it's funny how the media report about it. They say that this has been done, that Syria has joined China's Belt and Road Initiative in defiance of U.S. sanctions. Like, basically what they're saying is, how dare China not succumb and bend over backwards to obey U.S. sanctions, like as if U.S. sanctions are international law. U.S. sanctions are illegal. They're unilateral, punitive measures. They're completely illegal. And well done to China for not, succumbing to this pressure, which just hurts Syrian civilians. Bashar al-Assad, the powerful elites in Syria, the government, they're not hurt by sanctions. It's the Syrian civilian population who are hurt the most. It's always like that. It's the same thing in Venezuela. It's the same thing everywhere. So when they impose these sanctions, they know what they're doing. And Syria is starving. Syria needs to be rebuilt. And the other really significant reason for this is the Belt and Road Initiative, or as it's called, the New Silk Road. It's called the New Silk Road because in ancient times there was a commercial route called the Silk Road, right? Because of the silk that would come from China. So this is a map, right, of the ancient Silk Road. And note specifically how it would go from China and it will go all the way to Syria. So the original Silk Road passed through Syria, and specifically 2 cities. So the ancient city of Aleppo, which is to this day, it's Syria's biggest city. It's not the capital, but it's the economic center of Syria. And the other city is Palmyra, or we call it Tadmur. Palmyra is beautiful. This is Palmyra, right? So I've been there as a child. And This place is thousands of years old. It's an incredible place. There's it used to be ruled at one time by Queen Zenobia, and the Romans were here too. There's an amphitheater, I should say, that was built by the Romans. It's still there. Really a special city. Unfortunately, this gate here was blown up by ISIS, which again shows you, it's a crime, honestly, against human history and human heritage to what they've done here. This is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and it's just priceless history, you know. And of course, these groups, these savage terrorist groups that were brought about by Western, aggression. They invaded Iraq, they helped create ISIS, and then they do things like this. And a lot of things have been stolen from Syria. Just like Iraq, they've stolen archaeological things from archaeological digs. They've stolen historical artifacts and sold this on the black market. It's really heartbreaking. But it's good that Syria will be a part of the new Silk Road. It has to be. You know, it was part of the original one. And like I said, it's very good for Syria because right now inflation is horrific. The devaluation of the Syrian pound, the lira, it's plummeted. You know, like my cousins who are still there, some of them, they told me, how there's no bread. You got to wait hours in line just to get bread, and you get one bag. There's no gas. There's no fuel. So, you get in your car to go to the gas station. You wait for 2 days sometimes just to fill up the tank. It's really ironic how they talk about socialist countries. In the West, they say socialist countries have bread lines. Syria didn't have bread lines. That was created by the United States. The bread lines in Venezuela, in Cuba, in Syria, this is an effect of U.S. attack, of U.S. sanctions. That's not something inherent to these countries. So that's a goddamn lie. Syria was self-sufficient in wheat. Doesn't mean it was perfect. Doesn't mean it didn't have problems. But when you go and you bomb a country and you finance Al-Qaeda to destroy the country and overthrow the government, and you bomb the country to bits and impose sanctions on it, of course it's going to have effects like that. Of course the economy is going to be ruined. And then you're going to point to that and say that the government there did that? No, it didn't. No, it didn't. I'm a witness to that. So Syria was getting better and better every year. I've seen that with my own eyes. No one in the world can tell me otherwise. It's a goddamn lie. And, every year Syria was getting better and better, and they destroyed it. They set it back God knows how many years. That's the West that did that, and its allies, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, Israel, they're responsible for that. And it's good that Syria will join the Belt and Road Initiative. Guess who's also joined it? Cuba. So this was a few days ago. A few weeks ago, December 27th, I posted it. Cuba signed the go-ahead in China's Belt and Road Initiative. And it's important to understand that Cuba was already officially, technically part of the Belt and Road Initiative. What they signed here was a cooperation plan, okay, for joint promotion of the new Silk Road. So basically, it's setting things into motion, getting started, laying out what's going to be invested in. China is going to invest in telecommunications, infrastructure, education, tourism, you name it. And with Syria, they signed a memorandum of understanding just a few days ago in Syria. Here, there's a picture where they signed this in Damascus, entering Syria into the Belt and Road Initiative, right? And I really think it's important to outline the difference between China and the United States. Look at the result of the road we've been taken down on. We're in 2022. Look at where Syria is now because of Western intervention, Western regime change. And look what that's brought Syria. Look what it's brought Iraq. Look what it's brought Cuba. Look what it's brought Venezuela, the effect of sanctions. And look what China's trying to do. China is trying to come in and help these countries get back on their feet, right? So with Iran also joined the Belt and Road Initiative a few months ago, and we covered that here. Iran can't offload its oil because Donald Trump quit the nuclear deal. He put sanctions on Iran. Iran can't sell oil on the global markets anymore. So it has a lot of oil and nowhere to take it. So China comes in and says, well, you give us the oil because we need oil. We have energy needs. And in exchange, we'll build you infrastructure, which you also need. So it's a mutually beneficial relationship. When the U.S. comes to other countries and invades them, there is no mutual benefit here. There's the imperialist, the colonizer, and the colonized. Syrians don't get shit. Iraqis don't get shit, right? Venezuelans don't get shit. They get sanctions. They get starvation. They get, misery imposed on them. That's what they get. And why? Because the U.S. wants them to play ball. They want to take over their markets with their corporations. They want to control them with the international banking system. These are countries that don't have debt. Syria does not have debt. And so that they need ways to control these countries. And when they come with their IMF, with the World Bank, and these institutions to help developing countries, they're not helping them. They're trapping them in debt to then control their politics. And then people say, they make this accusation about China, that say China, it's a debt trap. No, it's not. It's not a debt trap. This is a mutually beneficial decision that is taken by both countries. Okay? It's not imposed on the other country. China does not invade Syria until it signed this memorandum of understanding. They don't order Syria to join whatever plan they have for them. The United States invades with guns, tanks, kills people, and imposes its will. Two completely fucking different things. Anyone who is comparing those two is a fucking numbskull. There is no comparison whatsoever. This is some bullshit Western propaganda to smear China, because the Western model has been violence, aggression, colonialism for centuries. That's why we're at a point where you have developing countries and developed. Why are those countries developed? Because they stole all the shit. They stole the resources, the humans, they enslaved people. This is centuries and centuries of the same practice. And now they just renamed it. It's still neocolonialism. But they can't tolerate another system. They don't like competition, right? They call themselves capitalists, but they don't like actually competition. They want to monopolize everything and on an international scale as well. So they can't tolerate China doing good things in agreement, not imposing, agreeing to do something with other countries. They don't want that. They want to control the other countries. And that's not speculation. It's a fact. There are U.S. troops in these countries that have been invaded and pillaged and destroyed. So this is a different model. And people don't like that. Some of them, they want to smear China. They want to make up. Again, we're not saying China's perfect. No country is perfect. But these are two different models. I'm sorry. They're completely different. And don't come here and tell me that China debt traps people like the IMF or the World Bank. That's bullshit. Don't tell me that China comes and imposes its will on developing countries like the US or France does. These companies, these multinationals, the French ones, British ones, they're still in the same countries that they colonized, that the French and British colonized, plundering their resources. They just do it under a different label now. They just do it under a company instead of, the government doing it. But in the end, what's happening? There's an imbalance of wealth. You have people in the country, let's take Niger, for example, or Niger. Niger has uranium. Do you think they're getting money from that uranium, which France extracts? Fuck no. They're getting screwed, and the French take the lion's share, and they give them pennies. This is just one example. So it's incomparable. It's incomparable. This is just nonsense smears that they want to say against China. And honestly, we've seen what the U.S., the Western model does. We've seen. We're living through it right now. It doesn't look good. Maybe it's time to try something else. So just from an economic standpoint, a geopolitical standpoint, it's good that Syria is in the Belt and Road Initiative, but also historically, I really want you to, I really hope people can appreciate the historical importance of this, because these are countries that have been trading with each other for thousands of years. The United States didn't even exist back then, right? When China and Iran, they were trading with each other. When China and the whole Silk Road, traveling through all of Asia, going through Palmyra, through Aleppo, this is historical. This is like human. This is our human heritage, So it's very important. It's very good to see that. And Syria, is really in dire need of reconstruction. And I can imagine that there are, the Biden administration is just continuing what Trump did. They know Syria is trying to rebuild. They don't want Syria to rebuild. They want people in Syria to starve. They want them to live under sanctions. And the whole idea of the Caesar Act is that if you interact with the Syrian government, and all sanctions work like this in general, right? But the idea is that if you do any kind of business, even if it's helping to reconstruct Syria, if you interact with the Syrian government, you could be fined or jailed by the US, right? And so that's how they scare people away and how they isolate countries. And they're trying to do that with Syria. And it's good that Russia and China are like, screw you. Iran as well, screw you. We're not going to follow your bullshit. And we really see the world transitioning into a multipolar world, right? This U.S. hegemony it's crumbling. It's crumbling. And that's why they resort to threats, military threats with AUKUS, trying to antagonize China, and now with this Ukraine and Russia. That's why. And they lost the war in Syria. They failed to overthrow the Syrian government with Al-Qaeda and all their little minions and their proxies. So they're doing a scorched earth policy now. Let's burn Syria to the ground, make sure everyone starves, cut Syria off, make sure that the oil is not accessible, which the U.S. is stealing, as you remember. They're still plundering that. Make sure no one can invest in Syria. And China's saying no. That's not happening. And Cuba's the same thing, right? I mentioned Cuba. Cuba's been under embargo, U.S. embargo, for 60 years. And they've done, commendable, remarkable things. Cuba made its own vaccine. Cuba has doctors that it sends overseas to help people. Cuba just sent a bunch of vaccines to Syria, right? They sent them a vaccine shipment. That's the difference. The United States kills people in Syria by cutting off medicine, cutting off medical supplies, cutting off food. And Cuba itself, I told you, 60 years under U.S. embargo, Cuba is itself in need, and it goes and helps Syria. Same thing with Iran. Iran is under sanctions. It goes and helps Syria. It sends fuel. Do you see the difference in mentality here? Do you see the difference? The countries that are themselves in need and need help go and help the other ones. That's, it's remarkable. It really is. I wanted to talk to you guys about something else. I love discussing history. Let me show you something over here. Give me a second just to load this up. And again, I'm very grateful for all your support. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for watching. And thank you for supporting the show. Even if it's just liking the video, it all helps. It really all helps. I'm just going to load this. Give me 1 second. So this is something that I was looking into yesterday, and I wanted to read some of this to you. Sorry, I need to drink something. Just give me a second. My throat is really dry. One second. I'm just going to change the screen. All right. All right. So I just wanted to discuss a bit of history with you guys. I'm sure most of you have heard of the ancient city of Babylon. It's in the Bible. It's located in modern day Iraq, and at one point in time, several hundred years BC, it was really the center of the world in many ways, right? I think it had a population of 200,000 at its peak, and the Babylonians, and this is why we call Mesopotamia, why we call the Middle East the cradle of civilization, right? Babylonians is one of those civilizations that really contributed a lot to humanity. Now, when we talk about colonialism and we talk about imperialism, how they rob the countries they invade, let's take a look at Babylon, right? This is an ancient city, absolutely priceless, and Babylon had a very famous blue gate. So when you would enter the city, there was a blue gate with lions on it, okay? And, I mean, we're talking about one of the seven wonders. Really, right? One of the seven wonders of the world. And do you want to take a guess where that gate is today? Do you think it's in Babylon? In Iraq? No. It's in Germany. It's in Berlin. They literally stole an entire gate I mean, this is just to give you an idea how enormous it is. Can you see the people there? Like how tiny they are compared to this? It's incredible. And this is not even the full gate. So this is the smaller part of the gate. The bigger part is so large it does not even fit into the museum. It's in storage. In storage, right? Like as if it's a car that belongs to the German government. Like yeah, just store it. So you can go and anyone can go and read this on Wikipedia. Just to give you a brief recap. So this German archaeologist, Robert Koldewey, he led the excavation of the site from 1904 to 1914. Okay? And they smuggled the entire gate to Germany. So Walter Andre used his connections with both the German intelligence and with local Iraqi tribal sheikhs to smuggle the remains out of Iraq under the nose of the Ottoman authorities. The gate's ceramic pieces were disassembled according to a numbering system and then packed in straw in coal barrels to disguise them. These barrels were then transported down the Euphrates River to Shat al-Arab, where they were loaded onto German ships and taken to Berlin. I mean, this is really incredible. Absolutely incredible. They stole an entire goddamn gate. I'm speechless. I really am. And do you know where this is? This is in the Pergamon Museum, which is in Berlin. I've been there, and I remember seeing the gate. And something else that really stood out to me was there was an entire wall that they stole from I think it was a palace located in Jordan. They just took an entire wall. And again, it shouldn't surprise you. Like, here's an entire gate. It's not just any gate. It's the gate of bloody Babylon, and it's sitting in Berlin. And here's another thing which they say in the Wikipedia article, right? I mean, look at the arrogance, honestly. So you see that there are a bunch of lions on the gate, right? It's actually a mixture. There are some lions. There's a dragon-like creature, and a bull-like creature, whose name I forgot. But it says here, one of the processional lions was recently loaned by Berlin's Vorderasiatisches Museum to the British Museum. So you know, the Germans, they decided to loan something that doesn't belong to them to the British. Like, you know, as if it's a car, or it's like, you know, a pair of trousers. Here, yeah, I'll loan it to you. Who the hell said it's yours to loan in the first place? And you know what people will come and say now to try and justify this colonial plundering, this bullshit? They'll say that, yeah, but you know, it's safer in Berlin. It's safer there because if it's in Iraq, well, you know, it would be destroyed. This was stolen from 1904 to 1914. So that's just right before World War I started. You're telling me Berlin went through World War I, World War II, the Cold War, and that's safer than Iraq? Are you high? How is that safer than Iraq? Berlin could have exploded at any moment. That gate could have been gone at any moment. And if Iraq is not safe, ask yourself why it's not safe. The Iraqi government is not making the archaeological site unsafe. The Iraqi government is not damaging any of its own history. That's you, that's the West, that's the United States and its allies that come and destroy Iraq. Iraq is taking care of its own. Actually, as a matter of fact, Saddam Hussein tried to rebuild Babylon. He tried to rebuild the entire city, right? Which, I mean, say what you like about Saddam Hussein, but in terms of historical value and trying to rebuild an ancient, epic city like that, it's quite a feat. It's quite a feat. And I just want to show you some more pictures of Babylon. So this is the gate that Saddam rebuilt. He rebuilt the Blue Gate in Iraq, right, in Babylon. But it's not the real one, obviously. The real one is gone because the Germans stole it. Yeah, here you can see pictures of it. So that's the one in Iraq. I'm trying to open the full image for you. Yeah. That's the one rebuilt by Saddam. And the real one, that's the gate rebuilt by Saddam, but the real one is in Berlin. And he obviously didn't finish the project because, well, you know what the United States did. But it's really just disgusting because the Americans, they've damaged the actual site of Babylon. So, I mean, this is just, it angers me. It really makes me angry. Here's an article from CNN. U.S. troops accused of damaging Babylon's ancient wonder. The UN report claims U.S. troops damaged the city of Babylon during Iraq invasion. Right? Camp Alpha was built on site of Iraq's historic Hanging Gardens. The report cites extensive damage to Ishtar's Gate. Ishtar's Gate is this, but this one, of course, is in Berlin, so they're talking about the rebuilt one. The processional way, the United States to pay $800,000 to clean Babylon site. The U.S. military did major damage to the site of one of the wonders of the ancient world while converting it into a base. I mean, just, yeah, how can you look at this and not get angry? Honestly. How can you look at these things and not get angry? Disgusting. Like, this is, you know, throwing pearls to pigs, honestly. This is so pig shit fucking ignorant to do that. They go to the Middle East, they kill our people, they steal our fucking culture because they don't have any, they take it back home, they steal the wealth, everything from A to Z. They even steal people, they even enslaved people, right? Is there anything they didn't steal? Is there anything that the Europeans didn't steal from Africa, from you know, from the Middle East, from the ancient world? Is there anything left that they haven't done? Obviously, you know, buildings are not worth more than people. The real tragedy is the human cost. But this is also important. This is our heritage. Not just as Arabs, it's human heritage. Do you understand? It's the cradle of civilization. Everyone should be pissed about this. There, you know, when Babylon was built, when, you know, Damascus was the center of the, you know, during the Islamic Golden Age, these places were nothing. You know, Europe was a forest. There's nothing there. The United States is nothing there. So to come here and then say like, oh, well, you know, the West is advanced and everyone else is stupid and they're developing. This is bullshit. There was a time when all the culture, the medicine, the science, the literature, all of this was happening in the Middle East, in Baghdad, in Damascus, right? The Arabs contributed a lot to this. Now, of course, the Babylonians, which is before their time, also contributed a lot to civilization, to human civilization. And they just come and shit on it and treat it like a toilet. And then they refuse to give this back. You know, the Germans refuse to give this back, of course. But they have no problem lending it to the British and Jesus Christ. I mean, you want to talk about the British? I don't know how many of you have been to the British Museum or the Louvre. But guess what? Most of the stuff in there doesn't come from the UK. It doesn't come from France. It's stolen. So it really says a lot to you about how these colonizers, they come and they steal literally tooth and nail, right? They steal the rocks out of the ground and take it all back. And then they say that it's safer there. Why isn't it safe in Syria? Why isn't it safe in Middle East? Could it be because you're destroying those countries? How ironic. How ironic. That's like if I come into your house and I take, you know, a painting of your grandfather and then I bring it to my house and I refuse to give it to you. I steal it and then I throw a Molotov cocktail at your house and say, well, it's not safe there. Wow. Wow. It really angers me, honestly. It really angers me how disrespectful they are. And you remember Trump, what Trump said to Iran? He commits an act of war against Iran. He kills General Soleimani, which is, it's like killing the U.S. Defense Secretary, but even more. He murders General Soleimani. He almost provokes a war with Iran. And then he tells Iran, if you respond, we will bomb your cultural sites. Do you see how disgusting the mentality is? How much disdain, how disrespectful they are. They don't care that, Iran has 35 UNESCO World Heritage Sites. I was stunned when I read that. I was like, what? I thought Syria was like the star. No, Iran has 35. It's incredible. Persepolis is one of the more well-known ones, but there are many more. And Persepolis is, of course, another ancient city. Fascinating, absolutely fascinating. You know, I'd love to visit that. But do you see how they have no respect? You know, could you imagine if Syria just dismantled the capital or the White House and just said, no, we're going to keep this in storage. It's not yours. We're going to keep this. Or the Statue of Liberty, they just take it and say, no, we're going to keep it in storage. And we put it in our museum. Would you like that? Do you think the Americans would like that? Do you think the British would like it if someone dismantled Marble Arch or Trafalgar Square, you know, Nelson's Column, and just put it in storage? It's so disgusting. It really is. I'm really offended by this. And I think it's nothing to do with being from there. It's the principle. You know, as a human being, this is our collective history. Everyone should be offended by this. This is really disgusting behavior. There's absolutely no reason for any of these things to be held hostage, stolen, and kept in the West. They do not belong there. You know, the Parthenon in Greece, for example, is another example of something the British refused to give back. You know, it's in the British Museum in London. It's from the fresque, you know, at the top of the Parthenon, and a giant chunk of it is in the British Museum. I've seen it. And of course, another thing which I've seen in the British Museum, let me show you. Give me a second. Right. This is from the Assyrians, right? This is in the British Museum. Here. The winged bull, right? Sculpture of a winged bull, Lamassu, from the Assyrian city of Nimrud. 865, 860 BC. So there are at least two of these in the British Museum, if I recall well. They're side by side. And that's also stolen from the Middle East, of course, right? The Assyrians are another civilization around the same time as the Babylonians, if I recall well. I think they didn't like each other very much, just putting it mildly. But again, it's just more stuff that they've stolen. And it's so much. I mean, really, you know, they have them even by sections. There's stuff from the Egyptians, from the Africans, you know, from sub-Saharan Africa. There's stuff from the Assyrians, Babylonians, Sumerians, you name it. You name it. You name the civilization, there's something that has been stolen from them, and it's in the British Museum or the Louvre, and in Berlin or elsewhere. And this is another form of colonialism. You can call it whatever you like. It's just theft. It's just theft. That's what it is. And I'm offended by it and disgusted. And it's really painful also when you see what's happening to Syria, because the same way that they destroyed Iraq, you know, and let me just show you another picture. I mean, this is upsetting. I don't know how you can look at this and not be really offended and upset. This just, you know, a U.S. tank just driving through. I'm speechless. Look how pig shit ignorant and offensive that is. Just destroying history. A fucking tank on, you know, priceless history. And so just like they've done these things in Iraq, they've done this also in Syria, right? So I told you about Tadmor, about Palmyra, which is an ancient city, part of the Silk Road. And ISIS blew up the arch, the gate of Palmyra. And then they were executing people in the amphitheater, in the Roman amphitheater. You know, there was kind of like a picture to show you the contrast. Like under the Syrian government, you know, there was ballet and there were other kinds of performances happening in the amphitheater. And then under ISIS, they're chopping people's heads off. Like that's what they're offering Syria. That's what the West is basically saying. They want to take Syria from that and turn it into just, you know, some savage proxy of theirs. And it's not just Palmyra. There are tons of places that have been destroyed. Aleppo, for example, has I think one of the oldest, if not the oldest, bazaars or souk, and that was burnt. That burnt down. I mean, just another UNESCO World Heritage Site. What a shame, honestly. Let me show you before and after. Yeah, that's heartbreaking. That's before, that's after, just completely destroyed. And then, of course, there's the Umayyad Mosque. I've told you guys before about the Umayyad Mosque in Damascus, which is, it's considered the 4th holiest site in Islam. Very, very important. You know, it's kind of like the template for all other mosques in the world. It's a fantastic place. You know, I'm really proud that it's in Syria. And it used to be a temple for the rain god Hadad, and then it was a Roman temple. No, so a Greek temple, then a Roman temple, then it became a church, then half church, half mosque, and now it's a mosque. Incredible. And that's in Damascus. That one's fine, alhamdulillah. But there is another Umayyad mosque in Aleppo, also in Aleppo. And that one's been destroyed, unfortunately. Look at the difference here. I mean, before and after. You know, now thankfully they're rebuilding it. I'm sorry the picture is not large enough. I can't seem to get it to go up. But I can show you, you know, these are before and afters of Aleppo, and it's really heartbreaking. These are so old, so precious, and it's nothing to do with them just being religious sites. It's also to do with them being, again, like I said, it's human heritage. You know, this belongs to everyone, and we should all care about it. And they just destroy it, you know, through war. They don't care. They don't care. And then they steal. You end up with people who are stealing some of the things either to survive or just because they want to make money. And these artifacts, they end up in other places. They end up in Europe. They end up all over the world. And they're sold on the black market. And then not only are these historical sites destroyed and bombed, but also plundered. They're pillaged. And I think I've seen them reconstructing the Umayyad Mosque in Aleppo. There's also the Crac de Chevalier, which is a Crusader castle. It's a very it's the most well preserved medieval castle in the world. It's also in Syria, and that also took a hit during the war. It's also been damaged, but I've seen them repairing it as well. So anyway, I know this is more historical, but it does have a lot to do with politics. And you know, I try to take a little. I try to tell myself that, you know, these places, all of them, all these places that I showed you, they've all been hit in the past with previous wars, and they've all been rebuilt, and I hope that they will be rebuilt again. And then one day, you know, they will regain their value and their strength and their beauty. So I try to tell myself that. But you know, this stuff where, you know, Europeans they just flat out steal. I mean, the arrogance is mind-blowing, really. It's shameless. That's the Ishtar Gate of Babylon. That needs to stop. You know, these need to be sent back to their original countries. So guys, we got a couple of donations here. You guys are very kind. Let me please read them to you. Vito says, China also gave 4,000 tons of rice to Syria to ease hunger and hungers and shortages of food. True sense of solidarity. Yes, that's right. I'm sorry I forgot that, but absolutely, that's correct as well. That's absolutely correct. And again, really shows you how they look out for each other. DC says, speaking of Silk Road, what are your thoughts on the Ross Ulbricht case? The guy, you were talking about the online one. I'm not too familiar with that. I really don't know much about the case. He got caught, I think, right? And he was anonymous, supposedly, in the beginning, but they were still able to catch him somehow. I'm very interested in how they did that, because that speaks a lot about their tech capabilities. But I'm not really familiar with the case. I need to brush up on that. So you'll excuse me. I don't want to say anything I'm not sure of. But I definitely need to brush up on it. Thank you, DC, for the donation. Thank you, John, as well. Thank you, Vito. And Gamal also sent something. I don't see any comments, but I'm very grateful nonetheless. Thank you guys so much. I'm just seeing if there's any other, so I can... Oh, we got a very nice donation here from Ramzi. Let me see if there's a note attached to it, so I can read it to you. Ramzi says, "Keep it up, brother." Thank you. I will, and I'm very grateful for the generous donation. I'm very happy. Thank you. You guys are very kind to me. Thank you so much. I'm just seeing if there's anyone else whose comments I missed, because I don't want to miss your questions or your comments. If you guys want to donate, there's the QR codes for Venmo, CashApp, PayPal. Again, I don't want to spam you. You know, plugging the show is my least favorite part of the show. I'd rather just talk about history and politics. But, you know, I do need your support to keep the channel going. And I'm very grateful. And if you want, you can donate also on Patreon. So that's monthly for whatever amount you like. $5, $7, $2, doesn't matter. Everyone does something different. And of course, I'll play a crab dance for you now. That's kind of our ritual. It's a little funny clip, so to speak, when someone joins. So thank you so much for that. And the GoFundMe, we're also very, very close. I don't know if someone donated. I didn't get a notification. Sometimes they don't come through, but we're so close to hitting our goal. And that's for the technical upgrades on the channel. Believe me, I did a lot. You know, I need your support to cover that so I can keep going. And regardless, even if you can't donate, you just like the videos, that's good enough for me. So thank you so much. Let me see if you guys have... let me try and read the comments. If YouTube will load them properly. Ryan says, why rebuild it when Israel is just going to come and bomb it? Are you talking about Syria? Yeah, I get it. That's tragic, isn't it? Every week, basically. They don't care. You know, Damascus is the oldest continuously inhabited city on earth, and they bomb Damascus suburbs every week, practically. Every week, practically. Mad World says, you should visit Iran, Richard. Their society is actually fine despite U.S. economic sanctions. I mean, I want to visit Iran regardless, you know, absolutely. There are tons of, like I said, Iran has tons of historical sites that I want to visit. Very rich, vibrant, long history and culture. I've never been, but I'd like to go one day, inshallah. And yeah, I mean, I wanted to say, I know what you're saying. Like the thing that we have to say about Cuba and you know, Iran is that even though the sanctions are hurting them, like we should still admire how far they've come. You know, like Iran and Cuba have made their own vaccines. They don't. You have to understand something. The United States says that there are exemptions for humanitarian aid. This is bullshit. They make it so difficult for NGOs and human rights organizations to get that exemption. Most of them don't bother. And in some situations, like in Yemen, it doesn't mean anything because most of the food comes from, you know, traders. So, you know, even if you get an NGO exemption, that doesn't fix anything because the traders are afraid to do business. You know, it's just they create a minefield, a legal minefield, and people just don't want to deal with it. And so just going back to Cuba and Iran, you know, they make it so difficult for these countries to get medicine. Venezuela and Syria is the same. They make it so difficult for them to get medical supplies, medical equipment, especially equipment. That's very, very difficult because some parts are so delicate. They're manufactured in Europe, in Germany, for example. You just cut off from that. Airplane parts, that's another one. You know, they put people at risk because the airplanes can't be serviced. There's so many things, man. It's so bad. And actually, Syria was doing pretty good, you know, making its own... you know, its own pharma sector, because Syria has been dealing with sanctions for a long time, not just since Trump or Obama, since way before that. And, you know, Syria also learned to be self-sufficient in many ways. And they destroyed that. They don't like Syria being on its, being independent. They hate that. It's like, you have to see this as a mafia thing. It's like, if you have resources and you don't give us a cut, we're going to commit violence against you. We're going to attack you. Again, it's like the mafia. You can't do business on their territory or on their turf without paying a tribute, without paying, giving a cut. That's how it works, man. Just think of it on an international level. They punish you. Oh, you don't want to let our corporations come in. We're going to punish you with sanctions. You don't want to let our banks run your shit, run your economy. We're going to sanction you. You don't do what we tell you. We're going to bomb you. It's really like the mafia. And it's even with NATO. It's like a protection racket. It's like, pay us some money and we'll protect you from us. Oh, man. All right, guys. We've been going for 3 hours now. I love it. I love me a long stream. So we've done 7-hour streams before. I can go easy. It's just I have other work to do. So, we'll make a comeback though for the 7-hour streams. Mark my words. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for tuning in. All of the segments will be up shortly. Please make sure you share them. If you're not subscribed, I actually never said this. I really hate it. When you turn on a YouTube video and like immediately in the first minute, like, hey, if you're not subscribed, shut the fuck up. I try to avoid doing that, but then in the end, I just completely forget to ask people to subscribe. I never do that. I don't know if you're watching and you're not subscribed, please subscribe. This is one of the only places you're going to get independent news focused on Palestine, the Middle East, real anti-imperialist stuff. Julian Assange, if you're interested in his case, I'm one of the only people covering his case in the court. So tons of stuff. I'm not going to go through the whole the resume, but this is the spot for independent journalism. If you're not subscribed, please subscribe. And for those of you who are subscribed, double check. They unsubscribe people all the time. Many of you have told me that in the chat. So just double check and hit the bell icon. See, I've turned into a full YouTuber now. Make sure you hit that bell icon. I should get like some shitty animation to come up from the bottom. I should harass you mid-rant to subscribe, just do it like that. But yeah, seriously, man. I mean, I'm really disgusted by what Israel's doing. I'm really disgusted and heartbroken. I mean, they took a family out of their home and bulldozed their house at 3 a.m. like a bunch of savages. If Jews were being forced out of their homes, if they were being evicted and having their homes bulldozed in front of them, do you think anyone would hesitate to call that anti-Semitism? It would be front page news everywhere. But when Israelis do that to Palestinians, it's okay, right? Yeah, just evict this family, force them out, arrest them, and bulldoze their house in front of them. I don't know what to say, man. And then they have the stones to call that a democracy. This is ethnic cleansing. Make no mistake. And then the Israelis will come and say, well, these families, they haven't been paying rent. And these families, they don't own the homes. And the court decided that they have to leave. Israel has no jurisdiction in East Jerusalem. I don't care what you care. I don't care what you believe or what you think. This is a fact. The United Nations has said so many times the Jerusalem law is invalid. Israel has zero jurisdiction in East Jerusalem. None. So your Israeli courts are illegal. They're null and void. Israeli courts cannot decide anything in East Jerusalem because they're not valid. They're not recognized by anyone. They're illegal. Do you understand? So these laws that, Palestinians have to be thrown out of their homes because some court decided, screw your court. Your fucking court is illegal. It's null and void. Completely null and void. I showed you all the UN resolutions saying that Israel has to get out of the occupied territories. It's crystal clear. Everyone on earth agrees about this, that Israel is illegally occupying East Jerusalem, the West Bank, and the Syrian Golan Heights. And what do the Israelis do? They want to double the settlements in the Syrian Golan Heights, stealing the land And then they claim that they're a democracy, and they claim that everyone else is aggressive to them. No, you are stealing the land from the Syrians. You are stealing the resources in the Golan Heights. You are kicking the Palestinians out of their homes. Palestinians are not kicking Jews out of their homes or Israelis out of their homes. And by the way, some of the people in Sheikh Jarrah are Jewish. They're being kicked out of their homes because Israel doesn't care about that. It's not a religious issue. It's a colonial issue. They want to take the homes. And the fact that the Israelis tried to buy off these families, they tried to buy them off and pay them millions to leave their homes. That proves that they don't own these homes. That proves that they don't have that it proves that the Israelis have no ownership of these homes in Sheikh Jarrah. If they own these homes, why would they have to buy off Palestinians? Why would they get the Palestinians to sign an agreement that they will not be evicted, but they have to hand over ownership to the Israelis? How can they hand over the ownership if they don't own the house? You just told us the Palestinians don't own these homes. So how are you telling them to transfer the ownership? Obviously, they own the homes. Obviously, they own them. And then this excuse that they're going to build a special needs school for Arab children. I don't care what you're going to build there. You could build a hospital. It doesn't give you the right to bulldoze someone's fucking house to build a hospital or whatever else bullshit excuse you're going to give. You know, Israel bombs Arabs and Palestinians indiscriminately. Now all of a sudden they give a shit about Arabs with special needs. When they shot dead Iyad al-Halla last year, well now it's 2 years ago, when they shot dead Iyad al-Halla, who was 32 years old and he was autistic, they executed him with an M16, and now they care about people with special needs? Bullshit. Bullshit. They will kill you if you're Palestinian and have special needs. They don't give a shit. They tried to cover it up. They killed Iyad Halla. He was autistic. They executed him with an M16 and then they raided his parents' house and tried to paint him as a terrorist. And then no one is punished. No one is punished. And now they care about people with special needs. Get the fuck out of here, man. Get the fuck out of here. This is an excuse to colonize Jerusalem further. They want to kick out anyone who's not an Israeli or a Jew, and they want to replace it with, you know, these settlers, colonizers. They could be from Europe, they could be from the US. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. They just want to take the homes and then dispossess the Palestinians. And these people are two-time refugees. 2 fucking times. Can you imagine your family is dispossessed of its home 2 times? Once in 1948, and then you get moved again in 2022. They bulldoze your house in front of you. I don't think people understand how savage that is, that you could have your home bulldozed in front of you. What the fuck? What the fuck? And then they want Palestinians to shut the fuck up and just accept this? Oh, you're anti-Semitic. Oh, you're a terrorist. Like, there's nothing you can do, right? You're not allowed to resist. You have to shut the fuck up and accept the Israeli oppression, the occupation. Everything Palestinians do is wrong. Everything people do in solidarity with them is wrong. But Israel is always perfect. Israel is always right. Israel is an ethnic cleansing. Israel is the democracy, blah, 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 blah. It's fucking sick, man. Honestly. It's disgusting. We have a couple of super chats from A Tester. There's a nice sticker there. I guess it's a dinosaur or a hippo. I'm not sure. But thank you. Brian says, thanks for covering these important issues. Richard, best wishes. Thank you very much. It's my pleasure, although, you know, the subjects are not exactly the nicest. But thank you. I appreciate it. And something else says, thanks for the hard work and commitment, Richard. Love from a Palestinian in Canada. Ahlan wa sahlan. My pleasure to have you here. Thank you so much. And there's no need to thank me. Honestly, you know, people need to know about this. And right now, there's nothing that you know. I want to give you an example. There are diplomats, foreign diplomats in Sheikh Jarrah in Jerusalem. I think the British, French, I'm not sure, but certainly the British. They went and did a photo op in front of it the other day, and that might sound good, like, oh, you know, they care enough to come here and take pictures. No, it's just a photo op. Let me show you something, because I didn't mention this before, but I wanted to, here we go. Yeah, I wanted to show this to you so you could see. So the Israeli Foreign Ministry is furious at diplomats' Sheikh Jarrah visit. Okay, so the Israeli Foreign Ministry criticized European diplomats harshly on Monday for visiting Sheikh Jarrah in solidarity with a Palestinian family under threat of forced eviction, right? And it said, quote, the ambassadors that attacked Israel today were confused, claimed a senior ministry official. Instead of protecting the residents, they're protecting criminals. Right, that's amazing. All right, so the Palestinians who are being evicted from their homes are criminals, but the Israelis who are bulldozing their houses, they're not criminals. So it was a delegation of European officials. Dutch ambassador was on Twitter saying something about it. And my point here is that this might sound good on paper and the Israelis are criticizing it, but it's not really, it doesn't do anything, you know? Like, I mean, it's frustrating because these countries, they protect Israel at the UN, they give Israel funding, they give Israel a pass for everything it does, and these are just words. So, you know, they'll go and sanction Syria, they'll go and sanction Venezuela, but they won't sanction Israel. They're not going to stop arms sales to Israel. They're not going to take any kind of, you know, I'm not saying sanctions is the solution to everything. No, my point is that there's a double standard here, right? Let's say arms sales, for example, right? They're not going to cut off arms sales to Israel. No, they increased them even. They gave $1 billion extra, right? The United States. And so these countries, these European countries, they're not going to do anything. It's just all talk, unfortunately. And, you know, we expect better. The J Mena historian made me laugh. That was funny. You're saying colonialism is a misleading term. It's Jewish nationalism. Well, it's certainly settler colonialism. It is. And there are very real aspects of colonialism that the Israelis have taken from the British. I don't know if you were tuned in earlier, but I was talking about administrative detention, how this was from the British Mandate. It's a law that the British imposed on the Palestinians where they can just arrest people without charge or trial. And the Israelis kept it, you know. So they you know, the fact that the British helped create them as a colonial power and the fact that the Israelis have taken these colonial laws and kept them, it says a lot. It's not the only aspect, but it's certainly one of them, just to give you an example. Gamal says in Syria, they still speak Aramaic. Yeah, of course they do. In Ma'lula. Ma'lula is, I don't know, it's like 1 hour outside Damascus when you take the micro. Micro is like a, how can I explain it? It's like a tiny minibus where everyone's crammed in together, right? So if, you know, you go with the micro, it's about an hour from Damascus, and it's a very important Christian town. And most of the people who live in Ma'lula are Muslim, but they speak Aramaic, right? So that's it has significance because it's the root of Hebrew and Arabic. They come from Aramaic. It's a Semitic language, and also Jesus spoke this language at the time, right? So when Jesus, Jesus spoke Aramaic. That's the tongue that was the what's the term again for it? Damn it, I had it with me just yesterday. Hold on. I just want to double check before I say it. Lingua franca, right? So if I'm not mistaken, Aramaic was the lingua franca at the time. That's basically what English is today. Everyone speaks English everywhere, you know, even if it's not their native tongue. It's the language people use between civilizations, between countries, between kingdoms. French used to be at one point, you know, all the diplomats would learn French and so on. Now it's English, and in ancient times it was Aramaic, right? Aramaic is a Semitic language. That's a lot of words in Arabic. A lot of words in Hebrew come from Aramaic. If you speak Arabic and you've watched Passion of the Christ, you know, this film about Jesus, they speak Aramaic in the film, and you will understand a couple of words. I certainly did. Yeah, it's, you know, it's has its roots in there. Gamal says, remember, Christianity began in Syria. Well, certainly it was taken from Syria to elsewhere, you know, like when you land in Damascus airport and you're driving to the city, You pass this church where St. Paul was lowered in a basket, and because to escape persecution, and then he then went to Europe, and took Christianity with him. Omar says, Richard, what can Arabs do to defeat Zionism both in the diaspora and in the Middle East? Man, I wish I knew. I think one thing we can look at is why are the Israelis able to do what they're doing to Syria, to Palestine? It's because they have support. They couldn't do this on their own. They have U.S. support, British support, and so I think that's one place to start. I don't know if it's the only thing to do. Certainly not. But it's a shame because the Arab countries, I mean, where are they right now? Algeria has always been good with Palestinians, supported them. Where is Saudi Arabia? Useless, Bahrain, the Emirates, they're traitors. I mean, not the people there. The people there don't accept this shit. When I showed you the Israeli foreign minister visiting Bahrain, people were protesting. So just because the governments do that doesn't mean that people are okay with it. Most Arabs do not tolerate the shit. They're against normalization of ties. But I'm talking about the governments, right? It's just, when we say America, the United States, I'm not talking about the people in the United States. I'm talking about the government. The corporations. That's always important to keep in mind, to differentiate between the people and the elites. It's two different groups. And the governments do these crimes in the name of the people, and that's why the people there should care. But just going back to your question, I just want to say, unfortunately, the Arabs, a lot of these Arab governments, they're nowhere to be found. The countries that still support the Palestinian cause, look what's happened to them. Look what's happened to Syria. Look what's happened to Lebanon. They pay a price, is my point. Even the non-Arab countries who do, Iran, for example, also pays a price. People need to ask themselves, why is there beef between Iran and Israel? Because of Palestine, because Iran supports the Palestinians. And that says a lot. Iran actually supports the Palestinians more than some Arabs. What does that tell you? But I don't know what the answer is, man. I don't know. I wish I did. I wish I did. Omar says Arab governments are Western puppets since World War I. Yeah, that's pretty accurate. That's very accurate. Basically, the British, they used the Arabs, the Arab tribes, to do the Arab revolt to get rid of the Ottomans. And then once they did that, they screwed them, right? They promised the Arabs independence, and then they fucked them. Nothing was independent. They cut up, they divided the Middle East. The French and the British cut it up between themselves. Sykes-Picot. The British took Palestine, Iraq. The French took Lebanon, Syria, and they just occupied it, and then they put these Arab governments in place. Not all of them, but certainly some of them to this day are puppets since then, unfortunately. Gamal says, I recommend you read the book by Ilan Pape, The Ethnic Cleansing of Palestine. Yes. This book clearly educates the actual difference between religious Zionism and militant European Zionism. Yes, and Omar says it's classic divide and conquer. It is. It absolutely is. Of course. That's one of the most important examples. And most people have no fucking clue about this, which is shameful, because the Sykes-Picot carving up of the Middle East, we are still living with the effects of that to this day. This morning, when Israelis are bulldozing the Salihiyah family's house, this ethnic cleansing is a result of that agreement, of the British occupation and the British handing over Palestine to the lovely UN, which, of course, this is one of the biggest critiques I have about the UN, why it's so disgusting that Palestinians did not get a state, but the Israelis got a state. I mean, this is the most fundamental, one of the most fundamental crimes of the UN. And the other issue, of course, is the UN Security Council. You have people with veto power. The 5 powers. That's ridiculous. The UN cannot work when you have some people with veto power. That's by definition unequal, and then it makes it undermines the entire purpose of the organization. That's not to say the UN does nothing good, but it's a terribly ineffective organization, unfortunately. Yeah. Seth says, as if the British own Palestine. Yeah, exactly. They just, they take these countries and then carve them up as if they own them. It's disgusting. It's really disgusting. I think Abdel Nasser, he said this, or the Egyptian president, Nasser is, how can I explain this to people who don't know what Nasser is? Nasser is he's a rock star politician, right? So he's probably the most loved Arab politician in modern or recent history, let's say, right? Because he died in the 60s. He's a real pan-Arabist, and he was giving an interview once, and he said, would you like it if we came and carved up Manchester and gave it to whoever? Pretty sure the British would not like that. But they, British come and we carve up Palestine and give it to the Israelis, and then carve up this country. It's disgusting, right? It's the people who do this would never tolerate that if it was done to them. SS says Gamal Abdel Nasser was ahead of his time. Yeah. Martin says, Salam, brother Ricardo. Salam, Martin. It's good to see you. Good to see all of you. Shadow Dissector says, hey, Richard, Claudia, and anyone else working. Love you all. Keep bringing us the truth. I got to split for now. Cheers. Thank you. I guess you're not going to see this, but thank you, Shadow. I appreciate that very much. All right, guys. It's getting late, so I'm going to have to jet, but all the segments will be up soon. Thank you for tuning in. It's been great talking to you guys, and please support the show if you can. It really means a lot, and I need your support to keep this going. So Patreon, $2 a month, $5 a month, whatever you want. It doesn't matter. You put in the amount you like, and you can support the show monthly. The links are in the description. Another thing you could do if you want is send a one-time donation of, again, whatever amount you like. I appreciate anything. Here are the QR codes for Venmo, CashApp, PayPal. You just open the camera app on your phone and scan it, and that's it. And we are so close on GoFundMe to hitting the goal. The GoFundMe is for technical upgrades for the studio, and I think even if we reach the goal, I would be in minus. But nevertheless, I would be really happy if we could reach the goal. I will paste the link for that as well. And thank you to all of you who've donated and subscribed on Patreon or whatever. Do you know, I just realized something. I completely forgot that we have merch. I haven't even thought of that for months. And do you remember we did the Uncle Joe's Rainbow Coalition Death Call? That's funny, man. Come on. So we have a merch store as well. That's also another way to support the show if you want. And get yourself some sexy anti-imperialist wear. We had one T-shirt which Mona made, which was chanclas for all. So chanclas shahata, it's like a slipper for all. And that was funny too. Anyway. Thank you guys so much. I really appreciate it. And I'll see you guys soon. Take care. Ma salame. Bye-bye.